In this world, there's two kinds of people, my friend. Those with loaded guns and those who dig. Broadcasting from a Montana wilderness fortress at the headwaters of the Missouri, this is Matt Christiansen Live.
So I came up with 10 laws that we could just be rid of. Not reform, not update for the modern era. 10 things that we can smash if we ever are allowed to get power again that would make this country better tomorrow.
I doubt it.
Listen to me, baby, that's all you gotta do.
One of the laws you write about is playing out right now, the Immigration and Nationality Act. This administration is using this statute to justify the detentions and possible deportations, actually.
Every law passed before the 1965 Voting Rights Act should be presumptively unconstitutional. Before the 1965 Voting Rights Act, we were an apartheid country. So why should I give a about some law that some old white man passed in the 1920s?
You are fake news.
You're a very, very silly person.
Very fake news.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
Thank you for your honesty.
Go back to where you come from, okay?
You suck. I hope Trump deports you.
Hell yes.
I dare you, fucking bitch!
Well, it's not my concern. All right, America, go to the YouTube right now.
Skag free, whoever he is.
Dude, Matt straight up sucks.
How dare you!
I can't do it. We'll do it live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Hello and welcome to the show. Opening the show with a frog in my throat. Great start. Bad omen, but we'll do what we can. This is Matt Christiansen Live for Sunday, April 6th, whatever the date. Now I'm just off. It's that kind of night. Sunday, April 6th, 2025. Thank you for tuning in. Sitting shotgun tonight is our friend Batman. Welcome back.
Howdy, howdy.
Well, great guest tonight as well. Earlier today, I recorded a segment with Alison Morrow. We talked Matt Taibbi's case that Trump is failing on free speech. Plus a few other interesting items that she's covered lately. Before that, you and I will get into the big news items of the week. The market taking its biggest hit since COVID, after Trump, of course, implemented his tariffs. Is there reason for optimism? What is the aim? Is it all some big 4D chess scheme? We'll try to make sense of it. But beyond that, a black teenager...
Do you mean to still have the music going?
Yeah.
I still hear it in the background.
It's fading its way out slowly. You hear that?
Okay.
How dare you question my production? I had an error to start the show, but it is not the music. That was a perfectly suitable fade. Anyway.
My bad. I screwed it up.
It wouldn't be the first time the duct tape is rolled on around here. A black teenager kills a white teenager at a track meet in Texas. That is the Austin Metcalf murder case. We're going to talk all the reaction, including reaction from Austin's family, which has become itself controversial. Later in the show, very authentic, certainly organic protests happen all across the country yesterday to tell Donald Trump and Elon Musk to keep their dirty hands off their precious government waste or something like that. These NPC protests are just angry brows for the sake of angry brows. It's very hard to find a coherent message to them, but I think it's interesting to examine who is behind these things and who's cutting checks for these things. And who's potentially getting paid. Not that they all are. There are plenty of programmable NPCs out there, but it looks like the money is flowing once again after maybe a brief break post-election.
It's maintenance costs for the androids.
Or maybe, whoever funds this stuff shorted the market really well, made a bunch of money, and is giving it to the protesters. And I have a hoax hate double feature. And lastly, Colorado is considering the idea of making misgendering your own kid, not someone else's kid, misgendering your own kid, a potential child custody issue. And one of the women in the Colorado state legislature supporting this is exactly as insane as you'd expect, maybe more so. Catch up with your super chats as well. Speaking of, hey, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the show. You can do that for as little as $1 a month. Over on my website, that's mattchristiansenmedia.com/support. Support for the show not only helps me sustain, but it helps me pay the people who make the show possible as well. There are perks available for your support too. And don't forget, there are lots of new graphics in the merch store as well. T-shirts, mugs, all that stuff. Likewise, merch sales help not only my operation, but they support the designers who made these graphics as well, all of whom are listeners of this stream. MattChristiansenMedia.com/shop. You can find both of those links right there on my homepage, MattChristiansenMedia.com, or mattis.gay if you can't spell my confusing name. And we got to say hello to our friendly listener-owned business for the evening as well, and that's our friends over at Hero Soap Company. When you try Hero Soap Company, not only are you getting a great-smelling, all-natural product, not only can you subscribe and get soap straight to your door each month, but you can get signature soaps designed by yours truly. Timberline, of course, is the classic, a frosty pine experience where the forest meets the peaks. Double menthol for that high-altitude cooling effect. Or try Old West, highly underrated. The reviews over on the Hero Soap Company website say, the sweet smell of leather and oak barrels will bust open the saloon doors. And don't forget, Hero doesn't just offer bar soap. They have liquid body wash, shampoo, conditioner, cologne, and more. You get 10% off all of that using promo code MCListener. Let freedom clean with Hero Soap Company. Promo code MCListener for 10% off site-wide, herosoapcompany.com. Find everything you need from our friends at Hero Soap Company, plus other great offers from our friendly listener-owned businesses like Western Razor Company, Kinney Mountain Woodsmithing, Hope Innovations, and more. MattChristiansenMedia.com/deals. Deals by listeners for listeners. All right, let's get into the news. And the big news late in the week is, an historic market crash, Batman. An historic market crash. Please send me emails about that saying. So after Trump announced his reciprocal tariffs on Wednesday, the stock market has taken a major beating. The Dow dropped 5.5% on Friday, the biggest drop since June 2020, of course, during COVID. And that was after a nearly 1,700-point drop on Thursday. It's the first time ever that the Dow has dropped more than 1,500 points on back-to-back days. The S&P dropped 6%, biggest drop since March of 2020. The S&P is down 17% from its recent high. The NASDAQ down 6% on both Thursday and Friday each, down 22% from the December high in that index. Now, driving the market down further on Friday was China's announcement that they're going to impose a 34% tariff on U.S. products. So there had been hope that China would come to the table to negotiate and not impose retaliatory tariffs. Nope, they're joining the trade war. They're going tariff for tariff. So it's going to be a little bit longer with China, whatever that outcome may be. But there is some decent news in the jobs report. And that is that the economy added 228,000 jobs in March. That is double what economists expected, though unemployment did increase 0.1 of a point, 4.1% to 4.2%. The labor force participation rate increased to 62.5%. That has been roughly flat for the last year or so, though. And remember, at least in my opinion, the labor force participation rate is what really matters when we're measuring employment, participation in the economy, of course. The labor force participation rate is what percentage, or the percentage of adults who are working or actively looking for work. And we are still in that metric nowhere near where we were pre-COVID. Before COVID, the number was about 63.3% of adults participating in the economy. 5 years later, we're still about a point below that. And 1% may sound insignificant, but remember the U.S. workforce is 1.7 million, or 170 million people. So 1% is 1.7 million fewer working today than they were this time or slightly before this time, 2020.
How are these people living? Seems difficult.
A lot of government benefits. And, it was a very lucrative time scamming the government in 2020 and beyond. People made a lot of money doing that. So do you count as a labor force participant if you are getting fraudulent government loans to the tune of millions of dollars and living off that?
Is con artist a proper job?
I think it's one of the most lucrative in recent years. Yeah. I think
all you have to do is call yourself a congressman.
There's that too. Yeah. They might be some of the few who have come out better. But, okay, so the job situation looks a little bit better. That's not a disaster. The other reason that it's a little bit encouraging is that at least partially, a lot of these federal government cuts coming through DOGE are factored in to these jobs numbers. Not all of them are. There are some lags in reporting. Some of these people have long severance periods, all that stuff. But to have a better than average or better than expected jobs report at a time when the federal government is cutting jobs all over that's not a disaster economically, even if the stock market does not look like it's in particularly good shape. So what's going on with the tariffs then? Where do we stand with all these newly tariffed countries or countries facing newly increased tariffs? Trump is saying that every country is calling him wanting to work a deal. Every single one. They're all on the phone. But here was Trump on Air Force One on Thursday.
Every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat. If we would have asked some of these countries, almost most of these countries, to do us a favor, they would have said, no, now they'll do anything for us. The tariffs give us great power to negotiate.
So every country will do anything. This is great.
Except for China, apparently.
Yeah, not China. You would think China would be the one. They seem like exactly the one to do anything, but they won't, at least for now. Now, of course, Trump speaks in hyperbole. That's the way he is. So I'm not necessarily disputing the point that a lot of countries want to talk. Perhaps they do. It's just we don't necessarily know exactly what countries he's talking about in that context. Trump's people are saying over the weekend that 50 countries are asking to negotiate. We'll see if that's true, what those specifics are. We do know at least some countries are making concessions. Trump says Vietnam wants to deal. The general secretary of the Communist Party, To Lam, is his name. He's saying Vietnam will cut their tariffs down to zero in pursuit of a deal. Now, that's welcome news to sneakerheads everywhere. The people who are sewing up your Nikes, I guess your Nikes are going to remain affordable. There is a lot of stuff that is consumed in the U.S. made in Vietnam, though. We don't often think of like Vietnam as some powerhouse economy or something. Look at tags on your clothing or tags on shoes and that sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff made in Vietnam, actually. So maybe you get a deal there. But are you a sneakerhead man?
No, I couldn't care less about shoes, to be honest.
Oh, well, all right. If you're into your Nikes, maybe they'll remain affordable. There are also some other countries who are making some moves. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is coming to D.C. this week to negotiate. Terms there not necessarily known yet. Taiwan and Indonesia are saying they're not going to retaliate with tariffs of their own. Taiwan is reportedly offering zero tariffs to resolve the matter with respect to their country as well. However, others are escalating. And as you mentioned with China, some of our biggest trading partners are escalating. So China has retaliated with matching tariffs on the U.S. Canada says they're going to impose 25% tariffs on cars coming from the U.S. into Canada. The U.K. is reportedly working on retaliatory tariffs. So our biggest trading partners, China, Mexico, and Canada, they look like they're still fighting, although negotiations with Mexico are ongoing, and with Canada too. But I found this news about Mexico to be a little interesting this week. Mexico and Canada, of course, are not part of the latest round of reciprocal tariffs that Trump announced on Wednesday, but they have been subject to tariffs of their own for weeks now. What is Mexico's negotiating position? Well, Mexico and their president, she is celebrating no new tariffs this week as a win. Oh, we got preferential treatment. We weren't part of these reciprocal tariffs. That shows that our strategy is working. If they're celebrating no new tariffs beyond the ones that they just received weeks ago as a win, that is not a powerful negotiating position. So I interpret that as weakness on Mexico's part, but I guess I shouldn't. I don't know. I mean, what do they got? Avocados and fentanyl? They have more than that, but yeah, well, Mexico doesn't sound strong.
Cars there.
They do. That's
they make
true.
A lot of cars in Mexico.
Yeah.
So
now the problem with this idea of negotiations, so Trump is saying like all these countries are coming to the negotiating table, and that's great, or that's awesome. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Obviously, you want fair trade deals with these countries, and if they are ripping us off, I don't think it's a bad idea to try to knock some of that down. But it does bring us back to the question of what exactly are you trying to achieve here? because the White House and various White House personnel are giving us, if not competing or conflicting, different explanations for what they're trying to do. And I think in this understanding, some of that explanation is contradictory or potentially competing with itself, I suppose. If the goal of the tariffs is to prop up American manufacturing and be protectionist about our economy and to deny access to our economy for foreign countries, what good does negotiating do? In fact, we shouldn't be negotiating. We should be blocking them out of our economy if that is the aim. I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm saying that is the logical conclusion of we are propping up American industry and excluding foreign industry. If you just negotiate a better deal with Vietnam or China or Taiwan and manufacturing of stuff that we consume stays there, even if it's at a better deal, that might be great for the American consumer insofar as stuff is cheaper, but it does not achieve the goal that we keep hearing about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. So I find the messaging still to be confusing. Do you have any thoughts on that or a way to square that circle?
Well, sort of. The way that I sort of see it is a lot of these tariffs have had the effect of making people who are capable of bringing manufacturing back in a, timely fashion. They're doing it, right? We're seeing a whole bunch of car manufacturers reopen plants and stuff like that in this country. So it's already sort of achieving the effect that he wanted. And, none of this is going to happen overnight, right? So you excluding all manufacturing right out of the gate, we're no longer taking goods from such and such countries anymore is sort of untenable, I think, given the, supply chain. So what he's doing is he's encouraging people sort of slowly to bring manufacturing back here without, totally obliterating everything for a little while.
Yeah, I could take your point that perhaps is the aim, and maybe it's not contradictory in that way, that you want to achieve some of both. You want an increase of American manufacturing, even if it doesn't mean that everything is made here. Meanwhile, you want cheaper goods imported from elsewhere, or to open up those markets to our products at a cheaper rate. So I'll try to trust the process as they encourage us to do, or trust the plan. Right? Trust the plan is the saying. And speaking of trust the plan, who would I be ever to question the wisdom of 4chan? Okay, this is the real plan. This is the 4D chess move. If you want to steel man the Trump position as much as possible, and if you're still a person that believes in that kind of 4D chess logic, this is the theory. Trump is intentionally crashing the market 20%. To cause a flight into treasuries, as in people don't trust the stock market. They dump their stocks. They start buying government treasury bonds. That will cause the Fed to slash interest rates so he can refinance the U.S. debt to near 0%, causing deflation, which in theory would lower the cost of everything for the consumer. Secondarily, the tariffs will force American producers to sell more of their goods in the U.S., not overseas, which, according to this theory, will lower grocery prices by keeping most or all of our food here, or more of it at least. And according to this theory, Trump is intentionally creating this market volatility, at least in the stock market, to get people to leave the stock market and go to these treasury bonds. So
great story, compelling and rich.
Do you buy it?
No.
Okay.
No, don't get me wrong. I think Trump is a smart guy, but this is I think this is sort of far-fetched. Yeah.
What's your biggest problem with it?
The fact that he's intentionally causing volatility when the whole point is the whole point people voted for, the whole reason, that people voted for him is to create more stability. And I think he's sort of, as politicians go, he's uniquely aware of what his supporters want. And I don't think that he would try to do this, given the risks involved.
I saw this theory presented to a few Trump White House people on the news shows this morning. They all denied it. Though, of course, even if they were doing this, they would deny it, to your point. Like, if they admitted to intentionally causing market volatility, that would be quite the admission.
Politically suicidal, yeah.
Yeah, so even if they were intentionally doing this, I don't think they would admit to it. But a few things a few problems I have with this theory, even if it was what was going on. I don't think it, and tell me if you agree or disagree, but I don't think the result of selling fewer products overseas, like in this theory, American food producers or farmers are going to sell fewer of their products overseas, and that means they're going to be cheaper here in the U.S., according to this theory. I guess relying on an idea of like surplus supply. But I think that would just cause lowered production. You're not going to keep making more of a good than you can actually sell. It would result in lowered production as a result of lowered demand, which means fewer jobs, less wealth, excuse me. My whole family's been sick this week, and I've escaped it until exactly this point, I think. But I also don't like this theory that like, it says in here 94% of all stock is owned by 8% of the population. I'll just take that as true. I don't know if that's true. Definitely could be true. But someone else's property losing value, that doesn't make you wealthier. It doesn't mean, it just means there's less to invest. It means there's less opportunity that's created for everyone. So even if that's true, like, the stock market is just kind of rich people's investment playground. Okay, but deleting their investment playground does not make you wealthier. I guess the theory here to try to steelman their argument would be, but as a result of doing that, stuff's going to be cheaper. So you're wealthier as a result of that. Like you have more buying power. I just don't buy that's how it's going to play out.
I think a key thing to keep in mind is that Trump is a businessman, right? So he's going to be very good at assessing risk. I think there's way too much risk if this is indeed his plan to roll with it than too much risk versus reward.
Yeah. I obviously I have concern about what's going on here. I'm not sure I buy into the theory of whatever they're trying to do. I am open to explanations, though, of what is trying to be achieved here. And I'm going to try to be patient, too. I don't want to be so knee-jerk in my reaction and sky is falling. And there are reasons for encouragement. It's not just the jobs numbers that I mentioned. It's that Jim Cramer is actually predicting another Black Monday in the market tomorrow. Or at least he says that might be coming under certain circumstances. So back in 1987, Black Monday saw the Dow crash 23%. And I think Black Monday was like the day after my birthday or the Monday before. It was October 1987, like right when I was born. Anyway, Jim Cramer says we could be facing that tomorrow morning.
If the president doesn't try to reach out and reward these countries and companies that play by the rules, then the 1987 scenario, the one where we went down 3 days and then down 22% on Monday, has the most cogency. We will not have to wait out too long, will we? We'll know by Monday.
Okay, so that's not a firm prediction, but it's a general warning. All right. So you can always count on Jim Cramer's.
Jim Cramer we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really good.
There's a I can't remember if it's like a Twitter account or I think it's in some sort of goofy investment portfolio thing that sort of broadcasts things on Twitter that takes Jim Cramer's advice, inverts it, and does exactly what he doesn't say to do, and it's actually it's doing decently.
Yeah, the returns are probably fantastic. Yeah, just take a mirror reflection of some kind of reverse of Jim Cramer's advice, you'll do well.
It's not doing quite as well as Nancy Pelosi's.
Yeah. If anyone has access to that financial advice, you're doing very well. But
there's a Twitter account for that too.
Well, we know what she buys, right? You could react to her buys, but yeah, you don't necessarily have the information ahead of time, I suppose, in the way that she is believed to have. But I guess you could just mirror her buys, assuming they're close to real time. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So, didn't that get banned? Actually, I forgot about that. There was an account and it was treated as like quasi doxing or something like that, or is it still operational?
I didn't hear about that, so
maybe it's still
right.
You
could be right.
Maybe I'm confused about whatever that was, but anyway, I do think that perspective is important here. Now, On the right or in the Trump fan community, I think there's been a lot of strange talking points this week about like what you need and don't need and how all of this is fine. Anytime that wealth is being lost, it's not great. I'm not here to celebrate that. I'm not here to excuse that. I think that is worthy of concern. we should be cautious about that sort of thing. However, I do want to zoom out, as with any market analysis, want to zoom out a little bit and evaluate our current conditions. Yeah, we've had a significant downturn in the market over the last half a week, and we're probably going to see some more volatility in the coming days, weeks, potentially months. However, the same people who are telling you that the sky is falling, at least in the news media, were just fine with absolute stagnation, at least according to the Dow Jones, for pretty much all of 2022 and 2023. There was effectively no gains in that entire 2-year period. That is fine, whatever. The stock market is just for rich people to play with. Who cares? And now that you've lost 10, 20%, something like that over the course of the last month, it's panic time. I don't want to participate in that either.
Well, it's just another example of how, partisan the news media is. One of many, many, many examples. But, if they were really delivering the news sort of, as objectively as they claimed they were, they'd have been screaming about this for a lot longer than Trump has been around.
Yeah. Well, there is sort of a bizarre inversion going on. I mean, you do have some people on the right who are all of a sudden talking about like quasi-commie talking points about what you need and don't need. And then you have people on the left who loved every corona intervention there was, for just like locking people in their homes pretty much, who are suddenly talking about the virtues of free markets and free trade and not intervening in any economic exchange whatsoever. It goes to show that Trump is like the great moral pole for many. He either is your moral guidance or your moral opposition, and you determine where you stand relative only to what that man says and does. And I don't want to be either of those. I don't want to be that like blind follower, even though I think for the most part he does good things. I don't want to be that insane opposition either, though.
Well, Trump is like anybody. He's human. He's going to make mistakes. Not everything he does is going to be perfect. Nobody can achieve that goal. So it's important to remember that, while largely what he does is beneficial, remember from his first term, he was responsible for that whole bump stock bullshit.
Oh, I'll never forget, even though I always feel like a broken record on that. But my bump stocks, don't forget what Trump did to my bump stocks. Anyway, I'm going to be a little bit behind in getting into my interview, but I don't want to delay this story because it's a big story this week, and I know that this meme is totally in poor taste.
That's disgusting.
But what else can you do? Everything must be memed, and so must this story. High school student athlete Austin Metcalf was murdered at a track meet in Frisco, Texas. 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony is the accused killer, and no, that's not Carmelo Anthony, the former basketball player in the NBA. That was Carmelo Anthony with a C. This is Carmelo Anthony with a K. And Austin Metcalf was a junior at Memorial High School in Frisco, Texas. The accused killer here, Carmelo Anthony, is another 17-year-old student from a different school in Frisco, Centennial High. Austin, of course, is white. Carmelo is black. And after some sort of confrontation between the two, Carmelo stabbed Austin in the heart. This was on Wednesday morning or midday. This happened with Austin's twin brother, Hunter, who tried to help his brother but watched him die. Hunter says he saw... That was the toughest quote to read. Do I have that anywhere in here? So the twin brother, Hunter, said he watched his brother's soul leave his body. According to Hunter and the telling of the story from the brother's father, Jeff, these two, the twin boys, were sitting there, and someone was behind them mouthing off. That would be Carmelo Anthony. And they turned around and said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Mello." And they said, "Well, you don't belong here. You don't go to Memorial." There are apparently tents for these teams. So there's a Memorial High School tent. There's a Centennial High School tent. This guy, Carmelo Anthony, is in the wrong school's tent, is apparently the conflict here. He had a Centennial tracksuit on. They said, "You need to leave. This ain't your spot," according to the father's telling of the event. And some words were discussed, and I'm not going to say on camera, but then they asked him to leave, and he basically said, "Make me." And then he wound up stabbing him, Austin, in the heart and killing him over someone sitting in the wrong spot at a track meet. And as we'll get to, that description of events is disputed by some. who say that Austin was more aggressive than maybe that depiction suggests, but more on that in a moment. So this is the twin brother Hunter who is speaking to media, describing the incident very similarly to the way we just heard from his dad.
This kid was sitting under our tent at track. We asked him to move. He started getting aggressive and talking reckless. And my brother stepped in and said, "You need to move." And he's like, "Make me move." Austin grabbed his backpack. The kid, I tried to whip around as fast as I could, but I didn't see the stab. But then I look at my brother, and then I'm not going to talk about the rest. So just that's just what I saw. And I tried to help him, but
it was just senseless.
It was really senseless. Really, I don't know why a person would do that to someone just over that little argument. It's just crazy in this world nowadays how people just up and do that. Like that man has a family. That man has people that care about them all the time, and he did everything for our family too. He was a strong man. He was a strong kid.
Okay, so Carmelo Anthony is now charged with first-degree murder. He's held on $1 million bond. Upon arrest, police say that Carmelo Anthony told police that he is not allegedly involved. He did it. So he confessed to the killing, though that really wasn't in dispute. We haven't heard his side necessarily or the reason for the killing, although we're getting some of that through his lawyer. But yeah, I mean, he's effectively making a confession to police at that point. Now, did you see the response from the father, Jeff Metcalf?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Let me get into a little bit of that, and I'll be curious to discuss this because, I'm going to try to navigate this one delicately. Let's put it that way. The response from the father, Jeff Metcalf, has become a little bit controversial for two reasons. One, it is very forgiving and sympathetic for this killer, Carmelo Anthony. And two, he says that everyone needs to stop racializing or politicizing this event. Now, beyond the sympathy that should go to anybody who's in his position, much of what he's said, I'm going to try to give him as much credit as possible here, not just because of his position, but because some of the stuff he said, I think is genuinely very good. What he has said publicly about God's justice and forgiveness, I think is great, and actually was critical of Anthony and his family. So here's one clip from a recent from a interview with media in recent days.
I'm not trying to judge, but what kind of parents did this child have? What was he taught? He brought a knife to a track meet, and he murdered my son by stabbing him in the heart. The guy was in the wrong place. They asked him to move, and he bowed up. This is murder. I already forgive this person. God takes care of things. God's going to take care of me. God's going to take care of my family.
What kind of parents did Carmelo Anthony have, Batman?
Actually, of that, I'm not sure, but I'm going to guess that his father went for milk one day a decade or so ago and never came back.
Could have been cigarettes. Yeah, we don't necessarily know.
Whatever.
But I would say, yeah, safe bet on that. Now, what I mean when I try to highlight this commentary first is that this point on that God imposes justice. God will see us through hard times. And yeah, that is as wrong, as unfair, as criminal as this situation was. That is how you get through a situation like this. It is to trust in God and God's justice. And I don't want to criticize him on that point. I want to be contextually complete in his commentary because I think some of the things he said have been great, perfectly justified, and I think appropriately restrained or admirably restrained. Because how do you go through a situation like this and not be the dad from the famous video shooting the pedophile in the head in the courthouse?
Gary Plausch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, what are your thoughts on that initial piece of commentary?
So I have difficulty picturing myself being quite so noble, for the lack of a better word, because I think that a lot of people would say God acts through people, right?
Okay.
And sometimes if you want justice, you kind of have to, do everything you can to get it, because God helps those who help themselves, right? So this sort of, I've already forgiven this person, and that's God will sort it out kind of thing strikes me as a retreat from the situation. And look, I've got all the sympathy in the world for this guy. Like that's a miserable situation, but I think this is really one of those few times where a little boiling rage is not only understandable but almost necessary.
He went the other direction instead with some of his additional commentary, because it's not just deferential to God. It is borderline defending the killer himself. In multiple interviews, the father here, Jeff Metcalf, has told people this event has nothing to do with race or politics, and you shouldn't form those opinions based on this event.
I want to clarify something right off the start, because I've already heard some rumors and some gossip. This was not a race thing, and this is not a political thing. Please do not comment if you do not know what happened. Do not turn this into a racial thing. It was not. Do not politicize this. It's not. This is a human being thing. This person made a bad choice, and it affected both his family and my family forever.
It's very unfortunate that this other child decided to make a bad choice that's going to affect him for the rest of his life. I want to make this very clear. This is not a race issue. This is not a black and white issue. I don't want someone stepping up on a soapbox trying to politicize this. I don't appreciate some of the remarks I've seen online that people say there was this fight and they don't know. They weren't there.
Okay, point of fact, as far as I understand, Dad was not there either, at least in the moment. What I've read is that he was on the scene after the stabbing and saw his son in the gurney, but I don't believe he was there to see the events that led up to it. He's relying on his other son's description of what happened, and I personally believe his other son. I think that's probably accurate. But you can't take that information, form an opinion on it, broadcast it out to the world, and then lecture the rest of the people who are taking that same information and forming an opinion on it. I don't like, it's not that I don't like, I think it's incorrect to make something a public story in this way and then tell people you can't comment on it, at least in a certain way.
We call that pulling a David Hogg.
Yeah, maybe. So, and my problem too is what he's saying is also not true. Statistically, this is a race issue. And of course, it doesn't mean that every black person is a bad person or that we should assign group tendencies to every individual. But it is absolutely true that young black men, say in the 15 to 40 range, commit a massively disproportionate amount of violent crime like this case.
Yeah, show me one video of a white dude pushing somebody in front of a train in the New York City subway. Just one. All I need is one.
Where they exist, they are rare. And of course, I know it's hypothetical, it didn't happen here, but if you reverse the races and say that Austin Metcalf stabs Carmelo Anthony in the heart and kills him, you know that there are violent riots in the streets this entire week.
Yeah, he would be the next George Floyd.
Yes.
For sure.
You ask where the parents are. The dad does. Where are the parents here? Well, that's the other statistical reality. Black families are overwhelmingly single mom situations. I don't know what Carmelo Anthony's situation is, but I would not be shocked to learn if it's a statistical trend. These problems are absolutely different on racial lines. That is a matter of the truth. Nobody gets to tell others you can't talk about the truth, no matter how sad your story is. And sir, your story is very sad. I sympathize with it greatly. I can't imagine what it's like to lose a son that way. But that doesn't mean that you get a monopoly on the information here, or you get to dictate how people consume the information or interpret the information. And if you want privacy, which I would fully understand, you experience a family tragedy in this way, you don't like that people are commenting on it. It's public, people are going to comment on it, but if you don't want to be exposed to that, you just ask for privacy. He's not doing that. He's going out doing media interviews, trying to control information, control understanding. That's my problem with it. Like you cannot leverage your position to tell people what they are and are not allowed to think about what happened.
Yeah. And I don't know. It doesn't smell right to me. His whole response to this, right? Like, okay, some of the stuff he said is maybe good, maybe noble in a certain way, but he, with the media tours and the way that he appears to be speaking about it, it smells. I don't want to say fake, but Something is off about his presentation to me. It just doesn't seem like it's 100% authentic, if that makes any sense.
It also is not the same. That position, or the position he's taking, is not the one that the rest of his family holds. And I'd be interested to hear, like, is it okay for Austin's mom and Austin's brother to say things that are a little bit different from what you're saying? Now, they're not coming out and making it a race issue, but in topics of forgiveness, they don't agree with the father, Jeff, actually.
Heard your husband say within hours of this that he forgave this other young man. Megan, how do you feel?
Not like their dad. I am so angry at that boy.
I'd like to say is it's forgave, not forgotten, but I'm not at that point yet to forgive that kid for what he did to my brother. Because, 17 years, my best friend, just there in the blink of an eye, I lost him.
Yeah.
See, that sounds more authentic. Not the practiced, this isn't a race issue bull that, the father appears to be spouting. It just, like I said, it doesn't sound authentic to me. It sounds like he's been given a script.
I appreciate what the brother said there too. Forgive, not forget. And I think that is key. I think that's a distinction we should all remember. To forgive is to relieve yourself of the burden of hatred or anger. And even in the context, maybe the most difficult context of having your child murdered, it is, as we were talking about previously, it is to trust that God will rightfully impose justice. You can be free of that hatred or anger. It doesn't mean that everything is fine, though, or that you're supposed to act as though nothing happened, or that it was just a mistake and nobody's really a bad guy in any of this. Doing that would be to set yourself up for the same mistakes and the same danger. So I really appreciated his distinction on the difference between forgiveness and forgetting.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And the whole forgiveness being, a relief of burden on yourself is definitely something that I understand, but it seems to me that sometimes, you have to carry burdens because they're necessary. And it seems like just immediately shrugging that off at this point, after having lost a child to a senseless act of violence, ain't it a little too soon? Like,
I guess everyone gets to set their own timeline, but yeah, that's pretty quick turnaround.
Well, he said within a few hours of the stabbing, which I could not imagine just going, oh, well, gotta shrug it off and gotta relieve myself of this burden now. No, I'm absolutely going to seethe for years after something like that.
Now, there is another side to this story. At least we're getting pieces of that. Claims about that other side. We're not hearing it from Carmelo Anthony himself, obviously. He's still in jail, and it seems like he's going to be held there probably until his trial. But this narrative has been forming both through Carmelo Anthony's lawyer and online commentary that Carmelo acted in self-defense. According to the arrest report, Carmelo told police that he was protecting himself. The report says that Carmelo told police that Austin put his hands on Carmelo first, but Carmelo told him not to. And then, like the problem that he's going to have of saying he did it, it's not alleged that he did it. He also supposedly told the cops, or asked the cops, what the criteria for self-defense are. Would this qualify as a self-defense case? What are the rules of self-defense? Okay, admitting to that uncertainty is also going to be a problem for him when he's prosecuted here. Yes, I did it. I'm not really sure if it was justified or not. As always, your right to remain silent is an important one to exercise, and he probably should have done that in this case. But in this report that I'm looking at here, we have some theoretically unbiased witness statements. The reason I say theoretically unbiased, let me see if I can find them. I forgot to highlight them. Yeah. The reason I say theoretically unbiased is because I believe these are very likely to be witnesses associated with Austin Metcalf's high school. They're probably not Carmelo Anthony's high school. So maybe they have some pro-Austin bias. But according to these witnesses, Austin told Carmelo to move out from under this team's tent. Carmelo then reached in his bag and said, touch me and see what happens. Austin Metcalf then grabbed Carmelo Anthony, told him to move, and that's when he got stabbed. So these witnesses are saying that Austin Metcalf made the first physical move, but if what they're saying is a correct timeline here, he's brandishing a weapon and saying, find out what happens if you mess with me. If you're in someone else's tent in their space brandishing a weapon, you're presenting yourself as a threat. That sounds like a defense situation for Austin Metcalf, actually. He has no idea who this unknown guy is doing God knows what with a knife in his team tent. He's trying to protect himself and others, and that's how things got physical. So to me, the brandishing of the knife is the instigation, is the initiation. And I'm gonna trust these witness reports on that. But
yeah, I'm with you there.
Carmelo's lawyer is kind of saying it was self-defense, but if you read like the headline here, what does the headline say? Carmelo Anthony's lawyer says murder could have been self-defense. You can see there's a hedge there even. But you read his statement, and this guy does not have the information. This is Derek Walpole, who met with Carmelo Anthony on Friday. And this lawyer isn't offering facts to substantiate this self-defense claim. He's just saying he has no reason to doubt the claim of self-defense. Quote, I know that my client said it was self-defense. I don't have any reason to disbelieve that. But I need to develop facts, talk to people, and figure out what's going on before I make any statements about what I think happened. I don't have any reason to think it wasn't self-defense at this time. Well, that just says I believe him for now until we investigate. That's saying nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's lawyer speak. He didn't say a word there. That he spoke a lot without saying anything.
Yeah, good politician, I'm sure. The online agitators are making their own claims about Austin being the aggressor as well. Tariq Nasheed says Austin Metcalf is a suspected white supremacist, but who isn't? Everybody who's white is, according to Tariq Nasheed. Tariq says Austin asked Carmelo to give up his seat like this was a Jim Crow era episode. Number one, asking someone to give up a seat, even in the segregationist South, did not justify a stabbing. And number two, Carmelo had no right to a seat in some other team's tent, so it was perfectly justified to ask him to leave whatever seat he may have occupied. But
what an evil take! Like really, it's unbelievable the depths to which these people will stoop just to try to racialize this stuff. You know, and the like whether or not the racial element is there, it is, sure, but like, oh, now this murder victim's a white supremacist. Like that's shouldn't that be defamatory?
Can you have posthumous defamation? Like, could the family sue? Yeah,
that's where I was going with that. Yeah,
I mean, I think it is defamatory insofar as you're making a statement about the only reason this kid is a public figure is because he got stabbed. So I don't even know if he counts as a public figure. If not making a knowingly false statement to defame him, you know, you're making a statement that is very reckless with the truth. And so I don't know. I've never heard of a posthumous defamation claim though. So probably not, I guess. You can defame the dead all you want, I think, is the legal standard. I don't know. Lawyers out there, tell me. I've never thought about that before.
Well, I mean, if you defame the kid, then, you know, you can theoretically see that as defamation of the family, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's conjecture, of course. I don't know for sure. I'm no lawyer, but it seems to me that if you insult somebody in that way, then you know, especially somebody who's, you know, young, you're speaking poorly of the parents as well.
But he said suspected, so I think he hedged enough to get away with it. Tariq Nasheed, he's very careful.
He's still a douchebag.
A viral post from someone called Mike Baggs claims that there's something to all the statement here. Well, when all these white supremacists are flooding your mentions, you know that something's up. So I guess the logic here is like, if someone I don't like says X, then Y must be true, is the thinking to blame Austin Metcalf. in this situation. Okay. But it's not just opinions. It is actually significant fundraising. So there was a GoFundMe page, or several GoFundMe pages. This particular one was called Justice for Carmelo, a 4.0 students fight. As always, Carmelo was just a scholar on his way to the chemistry lab, right about to have a scientific breakthrough.
As I recall, actually, Carmelo's grades were actually very good.
Were they? Could it?
Yeah, apparently I think he had like a 3.7 average.
Oh, well, they're saying 4.
If I'm remembering correctly. Well, I mean, it's close,
Yeah,
right? He was still doing really well. He just, all it takes is one decision to screw up your whole life.
For sure. And it could have been that. Although I have seen photos of Carmelo Anthony brandishing guns and other non-scholarly behavior as well. So who knows?
Well, yeah.
But as of this afternoon, so this one raised like 60 grand, then GoFundMe took it down. So the supporters have moved over to Give, Send, Go, where the official Carmelo fund is now over $100,000. Joke's on them, though. This is going to be just like Black Lives Matter, where the organizers of this fundraising campaign, they all buy mansions and fancy cars.
Bingo.
So.
Yep, that's probably going to happen.
Yeah. Speaking of great scamming jobs in this economy. Carmelo GoFundMe.
Like I said,
yeah.
Like I said, is con artist a job?
Yeah. But we're all the way through the story now. I buried the lead because we haven't considered the most important piece of evidence. And that, of course, would be... Oh, where's my button? I botched that one. Did I? Oh, here it is.
The N-word. You know what the N-word is?
Yes, whether the N-word was uttered. Did Austin Metcalf say the N-word? If he did, obviously justified self-defense for Carmelo. At least there are some people, isolated people like this Reddit post, apparently seriously claiming such a thing. There are unsubstantiated claims circulating that witnesses reported hearing Austin say it. He said the N-word. Now, the police report makes no mention of that. We have no reason to believe that happened. It didn't happen. We know that didn't happen. But the fact that a significant portion of our society believes that if the magical word was said, the entire analysis changes, and maybe outright murder would be lessened, possibly justified, that's worrisome. Like just the possible utterance of a word would change the entire moral framework here.
Well, it would in the UK. That's where these people want to take us.
Yeah, I guess so. I know that that's a little bit of exaggeration, but I'm asking seriously and not rhetorically. Is there an example of the utterance of a word in that way changing what would have been a self-defense scenario, like reversing what would have been a murder into self-defense or vice versa? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, only if it's a threat, I think.
Okay, so
if somebody says,
I'll kill
I'm going
you
to kill you right now,
and
then, I mean, I'm not going to take any chances, right?
But like in the American understanding or the sane person understanding, the distinguishing factor there would be the credible threat imminently in the moment. I want a situation where the distinguishing factor is the slur. Does that exist?
No.
No. Well, thank God. There's still some logic and justice and all that good stuff in the world then, if no such thing exists. Anyway,
well, logic and justice are things that escape the people who are saying this stuff, like this Reddit user or whatever.
Yeah. Well,
they're told what to think, so they think it.
I guess so, yeah. I had planned to get to my interview a little bit earlier, but now we're kind of at the top of the hour. So I think, how about a super chat break? Then I'll play the interview and then we'll come back. Does that work for you?
Yep.
All right, let's get into some super chat here. Over on Rumble, Lbot. Thank you as always.
We love you. You're very special.
You're the real MVP, Lbot. Spirit of Lexington. Matt, I missed the Wednesday show, but I wanted to respond to your surprise that Canada and Mexico have held out so long. And it occurred to me that there are leaders who are willing to let their country suffer. Well, yeah, I think that's true in a lot of countries. I think that we've had leaders in this country, not just that are willing to let us suffer, but like that we're suffering. You will own nothing and enjoy it, or whatever the quote from the WEF was.
You will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah, that's right. So I think there's plenty of that going on. I don't know. I mean, based on my experience from afar, I don't like the leaders of Canada or Mexico, but I don't know what their motives are. But yeah, I mean, I could believe you that they're nefarious in nature. Also says, so long as they can blame Trump and a lot of people will go along with it. I mean, that's, yeah, like we were talking about. Trump is like that moral pole for a lot of people. And so if you can exploit that for your own benefit, I'm sure there's a lot of people doing that politically. Yakko says, these hands-off protesters sure are selective with their rage. Where was the concern for billionaires influencing policy when the likes of Soros, Gates, or Buffett were doing the manipulating? Yeah, it is very bizarre. Like, hands off, the logic of hands off my money, I know it's more than that. It's like civil rights and other things, but part of their logic is hands off, say, Social Security, because it's my money. Well, okay, how about government hands just never touch that money? Like, we all actually agree on that. Why is hands off? I want the government to take it and manage it for a certain period of time and then give it back to me, but hands off that arrangement. That's hands on.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't actually care about that. They don't care that the government is taking their money. They want the government to take their money, right? Because that's what they've been told to believe, so they believe it. It's just that they don't want you doing it, right? They don't want people who align with your values to do it. They want, commie retards to be the ones who are in charge of that process, because again, that's what they've been told to think.
We'll get to those commie retards later in the show. Spirit of Lexington adds, regarding Trump's contradictory messaging, I think it's because the only thing Trump doesn't control is how other countries react. So he's telling us the benefits in all possible outcomes. Yeah, I suppose like there are multiple ways that this could go, each of which has a potential benefit. I mean, there are a lot of potential downsides too, but maybe I appreciate trying to help me understand exactly what they're talking about. Because I think now I have a lot of questions about the policy, and I think a lot of people do. And a lot of people argue for the policy too, but I think the most frustrating thing, just as a member of the public, has been the messaging on this. Like, what is the aim? Why are we doing this? What is the benchmark of success? And the best I can say for what I think has been difficult to follow messaging is sometimes in a negotiation, you're just doing poker face. You're just trying to manipulate people into believing you're going to do X, but then you do Y. That's the only reason the best reason I can think why the messaging is hard to understand from a public perspective. The worst reason I can think of is just they have no idea what they're doing. And as with anybody in government, Trump is not immune from that. Highly possible that a lot of these people have no idea what they're doing, and that explains it too.
Yeah, I think people on the left definitely underestimate how intelligent Trump is, for sure. But I think a lot of people on the right also overestimate it and sort of assume that everything he does is part of some grand master plan. When
could be.
I mean, he's probably just kind of shooting from the hip and seeing what works.
Yeah. Over on YouTube, and Taibbi, Injured Guardian, is AJW, Actual Justice Warrior, okay? He put in major overtime recently. I have no reason to believe he's not okay, but you'll have to inquire with your friendly neighborhood Actual Justice Warrior on that question. I don't have anything to tell you on it, but thank you. Appreciate it. Long Dong John says, another week and more blacktivities happening in school athletic carnivals. Did you or Batman see anything remotely like this back in your school days? No, I mean, I went to a very small, at least for high school and junior high, I went to very small schools in rural Montana. And as you can imagine, those were not extremely culturally enriched, as you might say. Now, there were members of various groups present. It wasn't like, it wasn't all white kids in every situation. There were members of minority groups of various types in those schools, but I definitely did not have the experience of, like, say, forced integration in some kind of urban center or suburban center, that sort of thing. I have no idea what that's like.
I went to kind of a larger high school, certainly than it appears that you did. But it was still in an area that was sort of overwhelmingly white. There were, there was some diversity sprinkled in, but it was nothing it wasn't enough to result in anything noticeable. And, I knew a few black kids growing up in high school and stuff like that, and they were fine.
Yeah, we had, obviously there were not a ton, but we had a few in my high school, and nothing was ever racialized in this way. Like this diversity talk was not a thing when I was in high school. Nobody, obviously like people were aware that the black kids were black, but I don't remember a single instance of those kids ever being bullied on racial grounds or something like that.
Yeah,
it really,
same.
you would think like rural Montana were a bunch of like Klansmen or something. Never. I'm not saying it never happened. I'm just saying I never saw it happen in, my years of junior high and high school in a place that would theoretically be racist in that way or something. Daniel Jagger. And now I present a quote from Zero Hedge. And now we have to wait to see just how much the limping Vietnamese dong, which on Friday dropped to an all-time low, will firm up on the news. Oh my God.
That's disgusting.
How much will the dong firm up? We're all hoping for that Vietnamese dong. I didn't know their currency was called the dong. That's hilarious.
Yep.
Learn something every day. Neglectful sausage. Metcalf is the oppressor. He's white. The other guy was black, marginalized person. What Metcalf did was a form of microaggression, asking him to move, then touched him. So the black guy just defended himself from a colonized minority, I guess. Yeah, and like I said, I know you're kind of joking there. But I'll take the point, like anytime someone is makes the first physical move, as it sounds like Austin Metcalf did, you do have to ask questions about who's the aggressor. But to me, it's that knife brandishing thing that is the distinguishing factor there. Like if someone comes in the immediate vicinity of my family or my friends and is brandishing a knife and saying, what am I going to do next? I'm going to intervene to stop you from realizing what you might do next. In the same way, like if what's his face, Jordan Neely on the subway in New York is talking crazy about how he doesn't care if he dies and he's going to do X, Y, or Z to all these people on the train. Yeah, you got to do the Daniel Penny, and technically Daniel Penny initiated the physical confrontation, but he was justified in doing so. This sounds like a very similar situation.
And Daniel Penny went above and beyond when it came to restraint in that in a physical sense. Given the threats that Neely was throwing around, I think it would have been completely justified. You just, 66 pounds of pressure, right?
Well, see, that's the thing is, now I don't believe that Daniel Penny killed him because I think it was a George Floyd situation. Like the guy OD'd, he was on a crazy amount of drugs just like George Floyd was. But even if, let's say that like Daniel Penny just straight up domed him right there. Now I know you can't carry in New York in that way, but I'm saying, do I consider it to be a crime if Daniel Penny had used lethal force? Based on the facts in that case, I don't. That's why that prosecution, even if the case for Daniel Penny was I didn't apply lethal force. I used a known technique that is supposed to just put the person to sleep. At no point was I attempting to apply lethal force. I'm of the perspective of I don't
Jordan
care if he
Neely
did.
was alive when he let go of him.
Yeah, at least for a little while. But yeah, he wasn't dead in that chokehold.
Yeah.
Greg Huey. Sorry, go ahead.
But in this case, there's I think this is a pretty open and shut case. Now, whatever jury winds up with this may not see it that way because that's the world we live in now. But if somebody makes a threat like that, like, hey, I'm reaching into my bag, I'm going to see what happens or whatever, that's the point where if you have a gun, you pull it out, right? Because this guy, you don't know what he has in there. It could have been a gun, it was a knife, it could have been anything.
That's true.
And
we don't even know necessarily what he's brandishing immediately. It's just something generically threatening because he's saying find out next. Well, I'm not going to wait to find out next. Greg Huey, y'all motherfuckers, is the ultimate Trump quote. Did he say that? It took me less than 3 minutes to find it from 30 years ago. My guy has been the same for almost 4 decades. Don't be lame, bro. We all know he's smashing the libs. I'll gladly pay more to benefit my countrymen. Well, first of all, thank you for your support for the show.
I love you.
I hit the wrong one. I meant to give you the Trump.
We love you. You're very special.
Anyway, I have a lot of skepticism about the current trajectory. All right. I'm jittery, at least in the short term, because I'm not sure what we're doing is wise or is going to be successful. But I'm not going to run around flailing. I'm not going to run around like a chicken with its head cut off. I'm going to assume that there's some reason, something that we're aiming for, something that we're trying to achieve. And I'll give it a fair amount of time before I'm, totally down about it or just dismissive of it. I would say that, like, if we get half a year into this, or, you look back at the Trump years in the same way we look at the Biden years in the Dow there, and you see stagnation or decline, yeah, then it's pretty fair to criticize. But I'm not going to overstate like a half a week. Well, it's been more than half a week. It's been the last month of decline. Like, that sucks. I'm not saying it's great. That sucks. Wish people weren't losing their wealth. But I remain open to the possibility that there's some greener pasture on the other side that we're pursuing. I need a better explanation for what that is. And I need some better benchmarks for success, but I'm going to keep trying to be fair about it.
Yeah, I definitely am maintaining a sort of air of cautious optimism, because we've seen Trump sort of achieve a lot over the course of his time at the helm. And again, largely, I like what he does. I have issues with some of his policies, as stated earlier, with the bump stock ban crap. But largely, overall, I'd say he's been a remarkable net benefit for the country. So if he's going to do something, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt first. And if it winds up being a royal screw up later, then I can apply hindsight.
VV says markets always rise and fall. Speculating now is just that, speculating. That's true. It is people making bets. However, I do think that collective wisdom is usually a pretty good thing to follow. Like, a lot of people in the aggregate making a guess is usually better than one person making a guess. So, I know that you're not saying it's worthless. I'm just saying I do think there's no pun intended, you can put some stock in it, like a lot of people putting their money on the line, betting a certain direction, generally has some wisdom or information behind it. But, I'll take your point that we have to wait to see whether these bets are realized or not. Greg Huey says, sucks to suck when you're up against a jogger. Jeez. Well, I mean,
jeez.
It's obviously I feel terrible for Austin Metcalf in that situation. It sounds like I think he did make a brave move in pursuit of protecting his classmates or his fellow members of his school. And it definitely sucks. I just don't think he sucked. I don't think it sucks to suck. I think the situation sucks. But yeah, I mean, anybody who's in that situation, I feel really bad for you. Zachary Bendixson, it varies state by state, but usually there needs to be belief that you are in danger of death or serious bodily harm. His situation doesn't really qualify, in my opinion. Well, we're going to have to see how this plays out in the prosecution. But if the fact pattern that we've heard from witnesses that this guy was brandishing a knife from his backpack and saying, find out what happens if you try to stop me. I mean, to me, that is absolutely the presentation of lethal force against which lethal force is justified. But I mean, I'll take your point. We don't have the full assembly of the facts from either the prosecution or the defense yet. So we'll let that play out. But
if he's reaching into his bag and saying, find out what happens if whatever, I mean, I think it's a little silly to assume that he's going to like pull out a cattle prod. He
was
right?
he was pulling out a lottery
ticket. He's not reaching.
I've got a gift for you.
He's not reaching for the taser. It's highly unlikely that that's what he's got in his bag, if that's the kind of language he's using, I think.
A. Denigan says, one of the main things looked for in a use of force scenario are the metrics of opportunity, capability, and intent. Okay, opportunity. Yeah, I mean, let's take that analysis. Opportunity for Carmelo Anthony to do damage, obviously there. He's in immediate proximity to other people with what we now know to be a knife. Capability. Again, he's right there with a knife. Yeah, he did it. He stabbed a guy. And intent. And so what maybe comes into question here is the intent, but if it's true that he's in there provoking and making ambiguously threatening statements like, hey man, why don't you come over here and find out what happens in a place that he does not belong, again, another team's tent. I mean, that speaks to intent to me. And so,
yeah, agreed.
I obviously I'll adjust my opinion with new information, but if it is as described, yeah, I don't think it's a defense situation for Carmelo Anthony. Anyway, I have to get to my interview, so we'll get right to that. Alison Morrow is back tonight, and we'll talk some of her latest work, including Trump's record on free speech, a Florida farmer who refuses to pay income or property taxes. He still hasn't been raided somehow after 4 years. Debate on RFK's promotion of a vaccine and much more. Segments about 33 minutes. I'll see you on the other side.
Stand back and stand by.
Welcome back. My guest tonight is Alison Morrow. Find her excellent work at alisonmorrow.locals.com. Alison Morrow on YouTube and Rumble. They're all linked in the description for you. Alison, thanks for stopping in once again.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
Well, you had Matt Taibbi on to discuss his article that Trump is blowing it on free speech, or perhaps may in the future, or is on the path to blowing it on free speech.
Yeah.
And he was talking about some of the pushback he got from his own audience.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into that pushback, wondering if you can summarize his argument a little bit. What are the areas in which he thinks Trump is blowing it on free speech?
Well, one big one is threatening universities, basically defund universities that are not going along with his executive orders. In some cases related to sports, maybe also protests. And Matt Taibbi, as I am as well, I would say, really takes speech very seriously. And I think we, over the last few years, as people who have seen firsthand, whether it was his reporting on the Twitter files or I lost my job, I was fired from the state of Washington for my podcast, for interviewing scientists and doctors who had different perspectives on COVID. So we've kind of been on the front lines of this, and I think probably are more sensitive to whether you want to call it an attack or you just want to call it erosion, or maybe you just want to call it, a boundary that is just a little bit too tight than you would like to see. I have my own federal lawsuit, for instance, right now against the state of Washington over what I just described, getting fired from the state over my podcast because I refused to censor these doctors and scientists. They said I needed to do that to keep my job. And I said I had a First Amendment right to continue. One of the things that my lawyers argue in my case is that the First Amendment should always be as broadly interpreted as possible to protect speech. In other words, the speech of an American, and of course, in some of these cases that Taibbi cites, these are not American citizens. Maybe they're a permanent resident with a green card, which has brought up some dissension for people. Hey, you don't have the same kind of rights. But the way that Matt and I look at it is, just like my lawyers, we would like the First Amendment to be interpreted as broadly as possible, because over time, we've seen how these little cuts, like under the Biden administration, well, hey, you're spreading misinformation. You are a threat to public health, right? We've seen these arguments made on all sides of the aisle. And so Matt, I think, is paying attention to it now under Trump. But because he has a lot of Trump voters now, given his criticism of the Biden administration, especially over the First Amendment violations over the last 4 years during COVID, now his audience is like, well, wait a second. It's not the same. It's not the same. So we had this interesting conversation. Like, is it the same? Isn't it the same? There's a lot of debate among, those of us who are free speech advocates about how far is too far. Like, is President Trump doing what's right for national security, or is that an argument that's been used before, which eventually ends up with a January 6er, for instance, not getting due process? And so how far do you want to take it? That's a real question, I think, that Matt brings up in his article, is like, how far do you want to take the risk of allowing someone to speak, or do you want to dial it back a little bit because you're somebody who is hesitant about in this particular case, you might say colleges are spreading, or not following these executive orders because they're not going along with one or another, DEI, the DEI stuff, for instance. Or you're saying that they're supporting Hamas, a terrorist organization, and so, in other words, they don't have the same rights as an American. They're not, here as a permanent resident, or they are a permanent resident, but they're not a U.S. citizen. It's very complicated. I think even Matt said, "Look, I'm trying to understand this too, just like everybody else." I mean, there's all kinds of different First Amendment law out there that I'm trying to get spun up on. So maybe you can bring up something I missed. Maybe I'm not getting it entirely correct. I'm still learning myself. But I think he brings up some fair points. That, like I said, he and I probably tend to be on the extremist side of interpreting the First Amendment as broadly as possible in order to maintain its existence and not watch it get cut and chipped away over time.
Before I consider some potential counterpoints, I want to play some of Matt in his own words, just so I'm representing him correctly. But here's a little bit of him speaking to the case he was making and some of the response that he got from his audience.
We've seen a collapse of speech rights all around the world. And if they end up just turning around and doing the same thing that everybody else is doing just to go after their political enemies, then we're in serious trouble. And I got a lot of backlash. My readers did not like it.
Why did you feel the need to write a follow-up where you write at the beginning, if I knew the "if Trump blows it on speech, the world is screwed" piece would get a hostile reaction, particularly from two groups, a slice of hardcore Trump supporters and trolling Democrats. So yeah, tell us about these two groups and what were they saying?
The main thing that they were saying, that the hardcore Trump folks were saying, is that the implementation of these programs like Catch and Deport, all of them are targeting foreigners technically, and there is still a little bit of a bright line in terms of the Biden administration's First Amendment violations. They were all over the place, but they were large. They significantly affected Americans. I'm having trouble getting people to see that when you remove funding from a university, even if they deserve to have their funding removed, that still affects Americans.
Now, I'm with you on preferring a broad interpretation of the First Amendment. And if I had to err, of course, I want more speech, not less speech. But I wonder, is Matt underselling it a little bit there when he says it's a little bit of a bright line that we're talking about foreign people? I think that's a significant bright line if you're telling me that the worst stuff Trump is doing is applying to foreign nationals, whereas the worst stuff Biden did was to U.S. citizens broadly.
Yeah, I can see that, but then Matt goes back to the Patriot Act and 9/11, and then how that eventually ended up getting us to maybe where we were. Actually, in some cases in COVID, but January 6th. So, I don't know. I mean, it starts there, but then it snowballs maybe to the American citizen. That's how this all works. So, like I said, it just really depends on what you can stomach, like where you want to draw the line personally. And I think a lot of that does have to do with the president that you voted for and your ideological bias. And people don't want to admit that, but I just think that plays into this a lot. I think if the same things were happening under the last president, and it was protesting, let's just say, the Ukraine funding or something, and it was a Ukrainian citizen, but they had a green card here in the United States, and they're like, stop this, funding. We shouldn't be funding the war, and Biden deported them or something. I think a lot of people who are saying Matt Taibbi's in the wrong now, I think they would align with him on that. So I just think a lot of us may not consider the fact that we just are willing to go a little bit farther with the person that we like and with our ideological bias, and when we just don't like the person who's making the decision.
Yeah, shoe on the other foot is always important to consider. I don't necessarily dispute that point that, let's say there was a Russian guy who was here legally, who was protesting our support for Ukraine, Biden kicks him out. Yeah. That people would be more skeptical of that. I just wonder, what is the appropriate theory of the First Amendment? Why does it exist? And I have a hard time believing the intent was for foreign nationals to come in and undermine our country here. And
okay, well, let me, I agree with you on the first part, but like when you say undermine, see, these are the terms that start to get us a little, like the hair on the back of our necks starts to stick up, because I was fired for undermining vaccine mandates. And so, okay, yeah, I'm an American citizen. I see what you're saying. But, you know, going to a protest or leading a protest, I mean, that is that undermining? Like all of a sudden you could be undermining a federal mandate that we really don't like by going to a protest. Now, okay, I agree with you. It's probably the First Amendment was not written for a foreign national. And so I you know what, I would personally like to protect it for pretty much everybody, as long as you're not like breaking the law. I can see your point. I guess if we were to have to compromise, like shake hands across the aisle, Matt, I would say, okay. Like I can understand why you wouldn't get so up in arms about this versus, coming after people, like suppressing speech that literally killed people during COVID. And I wouldn't put them in the same category, but do I still like it? I still don't like it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I'm always going to be skeptical of government encroachment on perspective. And even in the case of some of these deportations, I think you got to ask questions. You got to demand the evidence. I understand all that. So I don't think you guys are way off base. I think my biggest criticism is just at least of Matt, not necessarily of you, but underselling that distinction, I think is quite significant, because the difference between what you're talking about, say, going out and protesting COVID stuff, and someone who's here on some sort of student visa or something like that, one person is here by privilege, the other person is here by right. And I don't necessarily know that they should have the same protections in that situation. Now, counter in your favor is that generally speaking, legally, they do. Like, assuming their presence here is legal, they're on some kind of green card, student visa, they have the same constitutional protections that citizens would enjoy. We could talk about like whether that's wise or whether that's correct or not, but you guys aren't wrong legally either, as far as I understand.
I hate using examples that are like, okay, but what about this or what about that?
That's important.
But
yeah.
I'm going to do
hypotheticals illustrate the concept. Yeah.
I'll do it one other time. So I went to graduate school in 2004, 2007, right at the dawn of Facebook, when everyone was signing up for Facebook, just at the beginning of like being able to be canceled, but not even really. Barely could you get canceled 20 years ago. And so I was in seminary and I was taking all these really like crazy classes. I mean, I would have said that at the time because I wouldn't have wanted to get kicked out, but I was somewhat conservative. At the time I had just finished producing I was working for Fox News Channel, Fox and Friends morning show. I was a producer for them. I think they picked me to go to graduate school at Boston University because of that. They're like, okay, this is going to be nuts. We'll put her against our like rational, students in class and just let them argue all the time or something. But I didn't argue. You know why? Because I was like a total deer in headlights with some of the stuff I was learning. And I was frankly concerned that someone was going to like, send me to the hate speech monitor or something like that. And so, because I was, I would have been, if I said, wait a second, queer theology? I mean, what are we talking about here? In some of the stuff that we learned in queer theology class was like, it was borderline dirty. Okay. I mean, maybe not even borderline. It was like legit dirty. Like I wouldn't have, I would never have expected that I would have learned some of this stuff. So there was no debate in class. There was no debate. It was just one group talking and the other group listening. Now, fast forward, it's way worse now, because now on social media, you can really get canceled. Like back then, like I said, it was just the beginning of Facebook. So there's probably even less debate. So you think about people who would be coming over from another country who you might actually get a really good perspective from, like say someone who's coming from communist China, somebody who's coming from a place where we would really benefit from having like actual debate. You know, a bunch of Americans complaining about how terrible America is for this whatever reason. And you have the opportunity to hear from like, well, you should hear what it's like in my country. But all of a sudden now, if you're worried, and you can think of any number of policies. You're worried that you're a foreign national, you got a green card, you're a permanent resident, and you criticize something that's happening. Like, you're talking about a college campus where like really the exchange of ideas is one of the only reasons to go to college. I mean, I didn't really learn anything that helped me in my TV career, but meeting new people who challenged my ideas, that was worth it. And over time, that has really gone away. And now when you bring in the government to say, like, okay, we're going to rip you out of here because you undermine a policy, because you went to this protest or you talked about this or that, I just don't see that going anywhere well. Like, this is just an example for higher education. Now, I'll be the first one to say, I don't even think I want my kids to go to college. I think college is almost a
I'm
total
with
waste
you
of
on
time.
that. Yeah. There's a lot of repair work to be done.
Yeah, but you know, like this Mahmoud Khalil guy, I don't know. I don't know. I say that a million times. I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. But let's just, if you took his word at face value, that like he's just, you know, organizing protests or going to these protests against Israel, and he's being called like someone who aligns with, you know, Hamas. Like, what does that mean? Like you said, undermines American policy?
Yeah,
I mean, what does that even mean?
I'll take your point that transparency is needed. Because when I say that, do I think, if I were crafting a country, do I think, say, a foreign national has a right to come here and rile up a crowd against our policy and create a bunch of discord in that way? No, not necessarily. However, that's not necessarily the legal status quo now. And at least in that case, we're not getting a lot of information about exactly what happened. So even though I don't personally think the pending deportation of like a Palestinian guy who may or may not have been aligned with campus protests is a threat to my speech rights as an American, I'm a little bit skeptical on that. I do think that if we're going to be deporting people for these reasons, an explanation as to why is in the public interest. And the why explanation in that case, and in several of these that are similar apparently, is just, it's a generic accusation like you're saying. And I do think it would be beneficial if we had all the information to make that assessment. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that sums it up well.
All right. Well, I also want to talk about this guy that you encountered down in Florida who is just openly saying, I don't pay slave taxes. And by that, he means
property or income.
Property or income taxes. So you're down in Florida and you've encountered this man named Jim Gale. That's his name, right?
Right.
And he's got something called Galt's Landing, which is like a farming academy of sorts, or just a way to learn, a place to learn how to live your life self-sufficiently and sustainably.
Yeah, like a food forest and organic agricultural practices. And it's a very interesting place. It would be a place probably for all kinds of different people with different political bents. It's definitely a place where you would have a hard time pinning down where these people belong politically. I would venture to say none of them are either just a Republican or a Democrat. They wouldn't fit necessarily in the two-party system. They may be libertarians, I guess, but almost anarchists. I would say pretty close to being an anarchist.
So I want to play this clip of him because you go there and you talk to this guy, Jim Gale. Yeah. Galt is the name of the place. Gale is the name of the guy. I'm going to confuse that routinely.
Yeah.
But you're talking about not just the place that is Galt's Landing. He's out there telling you, I don't pay taxes. And you're kind of amazed that nobody has come to kick down his door yet. And he's saying, nope, not yet. And I'm going to keep not paying taxes until they do.
What is Galt's Landing? Galt's Landing is where our families live. We have 4 families living there full time, 100% off the grid. We are demonstrating the solution to all of the world's biggest problems, which is stewardship and service. And it's like paradise, and everybody's invited. We have Airbnbs, people can come and stay with us and experience what it's like to be surrounded by almost 300 different types of edible and perennial plants. We are here to show people what it's like, because once people experience what it's like to live this way, then every backyard in America will transform from a lawn into a food production system. We have declared that we are free about 4 years ago. That means we very publicly do not pay slave taxes. Taxes on land or labor are not ethical. They're not justified in any logical free world.
All right, so no property tax.
Yeah.
And did you say no income tax?
No, I will not pay tax on land or labor.
Okay, and so far, nobody's bothered you about that?
Nobody's bothering me. I truly know that faith and courage is the armor of God, and fear is a control mechanism of the slave master.
So can the IRS penetrate the armor of God? That is the question we're about to find the answer to, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, the armor of God, I guess, ultimately takes you to heaven. So it may not, the IRS may be able to take you somewhere with your armor. You might have to bring it with you to jail for a few years and then be free when you die. I mean, I honestly, I'm sort of joking, but not really. I think he is so serious about this that he understands that he could die in prison. In fact, Peter Schiff's dad died in prison for not paying income tax. Are you familiar with that?
That's news to me. I've never heard that before.
Do you know Peter Schiff?
I know the name, but I don't. Who? Remind me.
Yeah, he's like a financial expert.
Okay.
Investing and so he has a podcast, a very popular podcast. Been on Joe Rogan a few times, and gives basically like financial, stock market, Wall Street type advice. But his father was very convinced that income tax was illegal, was unconstitutional, and so he didn't pay. And they threw him in prison, and he died of cancer. I think he had melanoma or something. But he died of cancer in prison, but for that. And so it's a really interesting story. I had Peter on my podcast once and asked him about all that. And I pay income tax. So because honestly, Jim may be farther ahead. I plan to go down to this Galt's Landing to learn more about it, but he may be further ahead on the rest of us of like how you don't pay income tax and get away with it, because there are actually people out there besides him. I just haven't been able to nail them down for interviews who don't pay income tax and they're still free citizens. They're not in prison. You're kind of screwed if you take any services, and they might say too, like if you drive on a road, that's a service. But like, okay, if you call 911, if he's off the grid, so he doesn't use power, utilities, but yeah, you go to anything that's publicly funded, or you're taking any service that's publicly funded. So like one of the questions I got from somebody, which I thought was a pretty good one, was what about healthcare? I mean, where do you get your healthcare? How do you go to a doctor? I guess you would have to go somebody who works totally independently. You probably couldn't go to a hospital. You would have to go to, a privately owned urgent care or something like that. I don't know, because like I'm pretty sure emergency rooms and stuff like that do get, government funding. Like if they take Medicaid or they take Medicare, I don't know if you can go.
Just so I understand his approach too, this is not some accounting trick whereby he has zero income or something like that. This is clearly a business where they're hosting events, where they're having people come to learn about this way of living or this way of farming. Is he paid in the ordinary way we would think a business is paid, or does he have something else going on?
I did not get the sense from him of that, but I did not ask it specifically like that. Like, are you doing this in a way that the rest of us don't? Am I missing something here? He's married and he's got kids and they have an Airbnb, like you said. So, do they file jointly, separately, and she takes the cash? I mean, he said they're free, right? He said it in like, we're free. We've declared ourselves free. We don't pay this. So it's not just him either. It's, it sounds like everybody there is kind of in on it. He told a story about a permit guy who came to like see where are the building permits. And so he said originally when he first saw the guy walking on the property, he was like about to go up and tell him he's trespassing. He was going to like give him the talk. And he just had this moment where he got to like calmly decided he was going to invite the guy to see what they were doing instead. And he did. And he said, basically, look, you guys are out there like you're poisoning people with the way that you do business, the government. Like you're poisoning people, you're ruining their health, you're enslaving them with this and this and this policy. And here we're free. We do things that are good for the environment. We do things that are good for your health. We do things that are good for your mind. And this is how we do it. And according to him, he said the guy was like, you know what? You're right. We're not going to come. We're not coming back. So I don't know if that'll stick or not. I asked, who did he work for? He said the county.
Okay. So it wasn't the IRS. It was maybe a property tax guy or something. Yeah.
Well, and you got to have to wonder too, like at some point, does somebody get famous enough because he says he does a lot of podcasts because he's just flying under the radar. Nobody knows what he's doing. If he gets popular enough, then they'll come after him. I don't know. But like I said, I am planning to go down there myself because it's only a couple hours away from my house, and do like an actual report on it, see it for myself, maybe even stay there. And
hopefully not get him
how it
accidentally raided, although it sounds like
Well,
he's
I will get video
outspoken
of all
anyway. So yeah. Well,
I'll make sure I get video.
if people want to look at that, it's galtslanding.farm if you want to learn more about this place. Because hey, even if he gets arrested tomorrow, 4 years, no taxes, that's a nice run. So he has something figured out, and I'd like to learn more from this man. Just kidding. I would like to pay my taxes on time each and every year. IRS guy who's listening, I would never delay a single day, of course. But
well, you know what?
go
And
ahead.
too, Matt, like the other thing is, look, if you're going to, it seems like just having talked to some people who are kind of this mindset, if you're going to do this, you really like, you have to be out of the system. You can't like straddle the system and then just not pay taxes. And I know a lot of people who still think income tax would agree with him, like income tax is unconstitutional. However, you know, if you're going to take benefits from the government in any way, you pay into the system that you know, you can't expect the rest of us to do it and you get it for free. But if you're totally outside the system, like you're not taking any benefits.
Yeah, I don't think this
then-
guy's stealing from anybody, at least in my initial assessment of his situation.
No, and I mean, honestly, just having met him, like he is a very encouraging, I think he's kind of like a motivational speaker. I think he's brought in for like, he is a very encouraging person. Very little of what he talks about is like about the IRS. Most of it is about, you know, just feeling empowered to start being a party of your own, you know, your own journey, like not just kind of like going along with it, but learning like basic skills, like for him, you know, learning how to feed your family or learning how to build a house, you know, just being able to live off the land and just learn what simplicity can offer. And he's a very encouraging person. You listen to him for a while, and I'm not ready to go like, maybe solar power. Maybe I need air conditioning in Florida. I think they do. I think they're totally solar powered. So,
wow.
So they're probably fine there. But yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, I never got the sense from talking to him that he was anything but authentic and true to his cause. And he was a really kind person. He was one of the nicest people that I met at this conference, and very, very encouraging guy.
Well, the government hates that the most, so I'm sure they'll get their justice against him. Before we're finished up, I wanted to highlight this segment that you also had, which is a little bit of a debate on how to interpret this recent op-ed in Fox News from RFK Jr., Health and Human Services Secretary. And RFK, of course, is known for having questions about vaccines, so it seemed somewhat out of character for him to publish an op-ed that tells us all how awesome the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine is. And you had a couple personalities on debating whether this is hypocritical behavior or is this some kind of political strategy. Here's a little bit of that exchange.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., measles outbreak is a call to action for all of us. MMR vaccine is crucial to avoiding potentially deadly disease.
He's been fighting against that injection for a very long time. Very adamant about the risks of the links to autism, the ingredients that are dangerous, you know, generally highlighting it as something that's bad. And as recently said in the past that he wouldn't give it to his children, except when he went in front of Congress, he said that he would promote it. And so to me right there, that's a deviation in regard to what he's been saying. So my stance is anything other than removing it from use based on what he's been doing is hypocrisy to me.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is in a position nobody ever expected he would be in, to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. We all saw him battle and was under full attack during the confirmation hearings. If he came out of the box and said, the measles vaccine is horrible, nobody get it, he would be yanked out of office, because there are several Republicans who only voted for him after he promised he was going to systematically, scientifically gather new data to be able to weigh in on the products.
So who's right?
I don't know. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes there. I can just give you my personal opinion about, you know, the biggest concern I had about this article was that while he said it's a personal choice, he gave no scientific reason as to why you would choose not to get it, especially for your kids. And in doing so, he put mothers in the corner that they've been fighting very hard to get out of, the corner of it's just personal thing. It's just a philosophical thing. And more states are taking away those exemptions. And Maine, Maine, I don't even think you could like homeschool. I have a friend that's up in Maine, and it really, they've lost all their exemptions. And so when you keep pushing the narrative, whoever you are, CNN or Fox News Channel, with an op-ed from RFK Jr., and you push the narrative that, hey, okay, it's a personal choice, but you give nobody reading a scientific reason why you would make that choice, then you set it up as this dichotomy that I saw quite a bit when I was in the TV business, which is like mom at a protest versus Department of Health over whatever issue it is. And they did this during COVID. When there were people that chose not to get the COVID vaccine, oftentimes you'd see somebody that would just walk out of Walmart and they would say, I think it's the sign of the beast, or I just don't want to get it. I don't like it. And then they would have Fauci on, or somebody else that would talk scientifically about all the reasons why you should get it, or the CDC.
Yeah, kind of straw man versus steel man type dynamic. Yeah,
exactly. And to me, that's what this article did. It reinforced that same idea that moms are just selfish. They're selfish. They don't want to, take it for the team. They don't want to do one for the team. It was very much like similar to the COVID playbook. So I was surprised to see that out of RFK Jr. I mean, a lot of people are saying, well, somebody else probably wrote it, or whatever. To me, it's like, if you put your name on it, you put your name on it. And I can see what Bernadette was saying, that like, okay, he has to be a little bit careful here. I think, me personally, I would have, if he had just added a couple lines, I mean, I still would have been skeptical of the fact that he said, like, go get the vaccine after everything he said in the past. Yeah, I think that's a little weird. Ryan brings that up. But if he had just added a few lines about, some of the reasons people choose not to do this, blah, 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 scientifically speaking, then, that would help. But man, for some reason, I mean, one of my biggest takeaways from this was like, wow, you really can't criticize vaccines. I mean, you really can't. Once you get into the government, for some reason, you got these velvet handcuffs on, and like, you cannot survive there if you talk about vaccines. I think that should really caution all of us about, like, what is it about vaccines? I mean, there's so many things that these government officials will debate, but for some reason, man, I'm telling you, you get into a higher office and it's like, the vaccine card's just got to come out of your back pocket. Like, you cannot criticize it. And it was that way in television news too. I was told that, we would not let anybody criticize vaccines on TV, that would be basically giving voice to some kind of crazy person, crazy thought that would endanger public health. And so when you see, like, if RFK's past, like, you're familiar with everything he said on John Stossel's show, he would not give his kid that vaccine. Okay. And so to see him say in an article that all of a sudden we should all go out and get it, I mean, that is, I'm sorry, but that's different from, but you know what, if he's going to write it, fine, at least give us some scientifically backed reasons for why we could do something else and choose not to do that, instead of just leaving it at, like, the science says get it, but it's a personal choice. So if you just kind of feel weird about it, you don't really want to do anything to help keep other kids safe, and you're just one of those weirdo moms that practices yoga, drinks kombucha, and just lies out in the sun all day, which is basically what I do, then, you're totally nuts. I would have been a little bit better off if I just seen a little bit more science on that end.
Well, the moral of the story is we all need a tax-free farm in Florida, and for wisdom
there you go.
On that front, you can check out my guest, Alison Morrow. Find her at alisonmorrow.locals.com. Alison Morrow on YouTube and Rumble, linked in the description for you. Alison, thank you as always for joining, and thank you for your great work.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks again to my guest, Alison Morrow. Find her work at alisonmorrow.locals.com. Alison Morrow on YouTube and Rumble. Linked right there in the description for you. All right, Batman, I got to talk about these hands-off protests yesterday.
Yep.
And of course, as I mentioned at the top of the show, very organic, very authentic. Now, During the break, I was looking at some images and some reaction to these protests. Maybe when I sarcastically say very authentic, very organic, maybe they are more authentic and organic than I'm giving them credit for, because one of the things I had not observed earlier in the day, as many wiser minds are noting on X, there are a lot of olds in these crowds, man. This is not, when I think paid protesters, I think like recent impressionable college grads. I don't think all these gray-haireds walking around. Did you notice that?
I didn't until you pointed out, but having said that, basically, if you want a paid protester group, you're looking for people with time on their hands. And so that could be people who are recently out of college and not working yet, people who are in college because their courses are too easy, or old people who don't have anything better to do.
Like, this is just a randomly accessed photo, okay? I'm looking at the Breitbart coverage, pull up a tweet that's embedded in there. I hadn't looked at this in detail previously, but just like survey this crowd, okay? I'm just picking a photo at random. There are a lot of olds. That's a lot of old faces in that crowd. Right here, like these are not the young people David Hogg is trying to inspire. And so I'll take your point. Like, I guess I just assume paid protesters would be young, but maybe not. I mean, I don't know. It's a rough economy for everybody. You got to take whatever job you can get.
That's true. And presumably they just, to get people to this protest, they just advertise through the AARP.
Maybe, and I assume from the Kamala speeches in D.C., or at least the one where they absolutely, excuse me, God,
'tis the season.
I guess so. Remember that like supposedly gigantic speech for Kamala that they had, where there was lines and lines of buses parked beside the speech venue, and they absolutely bust people in. I assume those buses are still doing work somewhere, but there were thousands of these protesters across the country yesterday. Guys, I was, all right, one more. Hold on. I'm going to mute myself.
You didn't, but
I did for the stream, not for you. Yeah.
Okay.
They didn't hear it, but you got the pleasure. Okay. So thousands of these protesters gathered at some 1,300 protest events across the country yesterday. This protest event is branded hands off. And I guess it's generically anti-Trump, anti-Elon Musk by extension. Hands off our precious government waste. We love that stuff. But officially, like, hands off our civil rights and hands off our social security and our freedom generically and our education. Again, hands off your education would be the federal government has nothing to do with your education anymore. That's what they're trying to do. That is hands off. How is hands off? Hands off it's not hands off your education. It's hands off the Department of Education, which is a distinct entity from your education. But I digress.
Yeah, it occurs. They've been branding this in such a way where it's like, oh, they're trying to take our Social Security away, because that's what they've been lying about since before the election.
Wiser minds say, if only. We'd love that, but they're not trying to do that.
So it actually makes perfect sense that the people that they hire and bus in for this are older people to whom it would appear that Social Security would apply.
Yeah, maybe.
It's all about image.
Yeah, maybe there is a strategy there. But if there is a broader strategy, and I won't waste any time further in trying to seriously analyze the motivations that turn those NPC eyebrows angled downward, because they're just forever downward. They love angling their eyebrows downward. That's what they do as a hobby. It's what they do recreationally. But if there is some grand strategy here, hey, here's a strategy: being an illegal immigrant and proudly announcing it on stage in D.C. I'm here and I'm undocumented. This is a woman on the stage.
The catapult.
I assume they had one somewhere in the city, but yeah, on the stage in DC yesterday. And she says not just that she's a proud illegal, but she's also gay.
My name is Gracia Martinez Rosas. I am an immigrant. I am undocumented, unafraid, queer, and unashamed.
I dare you fucking
Yeah, that's the problem.
What's the problem? All of the things?
Unafraid and unashamed. That's the problem. You should be afraid and you should feel shame.
I think her name is very appropriate. Greasa. Looks like she's had plenty of Greasas. She's eaten many. Is she going to die of heart disease or get deported first? What's going to get her?
Flip a coin.
Either way, her days are numbered. But yeah, advertising your undocumentedness publicly is a move. And so someone, her name is Jessica Greasa. So someone tweeted at ICE that this Jessica Greasa. No, wait. Is that her name? What's her? Now I'm all confused. Is her name Jessica? What is Greasa's first name?
I think it's
Greasa Martinez. Yeah, let's back up. Fatty McGee's name here is Greasa Martinez Rosas. Okay. The Jessica person that I got confused about is the person who tweeted this. This is just a person on X named Jessica. Real Jessica 05 tweets at ICE, hey, Greasa is publicly advertising how she's unafraid, queer, and undocumented. Maybe you guys should do something about that. And Stephen Chung, the White House communications director, responded with a gif of former Patriots coach Bill Belichick taking some notes on the sideline. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that the gif was realized, at least the end aim. Like, I don't think she was arrested. I didn't see anything about that. But if she was actually picked up by ICE at this event, that would have been an amazing scene. But it didn't happen. So, like I said, of course, there were thousands of people out there yesterday. I'm not saying everybody's paid or everybody's fake, but getting sizable simultaneous protests like this, that is not something that just happens. Like all of a sudden, this many people just decide one day. At minimum, it requires massive organization. It requires resources for that organization. And like I said, it requires repurposing all those buses that Kamala used to bring her people into D.C. prior. I assume they need oil changes, brake checks, all that sort of stuff. But even if the NPCs in the crowds are real and they're receiving their programming, the question is who's doing the organizing. And that's not necessarily a secret. There are several organizations that are included in the reporting. There's Third Act, Indivisible, Move On, and Fight Back Table. They've all been planning this event for weeks. And given recent cuts in government funding and scrutiny on government waste, you wonder, like, well, is that what they mean by hands off? Like, hands off our precious government cookie jar. We've had our hands in there for a long time, and we don't want you taking our money away. It could be some of that. But at least some of these organizations are actually Soros funded. And I know it's often a meme and it's often a convenient scapegoat, but it's a meme because it's often true. And it's not just some loose accusation. It's legitimate in this case. There's a group called Indivisible, or the Indivisible Project, one of the groups organizing these protests. They have received over $7 million in grants since 2017 from the Soros Open Society Foundation. And so you have the co-executive director, and you can see all these grants on the Open Society website. You have the co-executive director of this organization, Indivisible. His name is Ezra Levin. He goes on Rachel Maddow's show on Friday, and he insists, he wants us all to believe how authentic and organic these protests really are.
Saturday is going to be very busy. I said at the top of the show, there are more than 1,200 protests planned for tomorrow in all 50 states. I stand corrected. It is more than 1,300.
This sense that they are overreaching so much and there is a possibility to fight back and win is leading to this just incredible response. As you said, more than 1,300 events every single state. Yes, there are over 100 events in California. There are more than 60 in the state of New York, more than 50 in Washington. But it's not just blue states, Rachel. We see 17 events across the state of Montana, 14 across Alaska. This is everywhere. And these are normal, everyday people who are saying, hey, I've had enough.
We're not
if
paid
you pay
actors.
normal,
It really happened.
He did the meme.
I was gonna say, yeah, if you pay normal everyday people, they're more likely to do what you want.
But that is the bit. He's actually doing the bit like, oh, these are totally your authentic, real neighbors who you might find in your town.
Where's that bit with Steve Buscemi going, hello, fellow kids?
Yeah. Hello, fellow angry NPCs. Yeah. The thing is, though, if these protests are authentic or organic, then Ezra Levin's job at this Indivisible project, it's unnecessary. Why is his organizing even necessary if everybody's just kind of doing this at their own motivation or their own organization? Now, again, I don't have evidence to say that these protesters themselves are paid, but someone is paid to organize them and move them and feed them, and that is absolutely not organic. That is a deliberate operation, but it has the same effect at the end of this as Cory Booker's 25-hour speech. It's like, okay, cool. You went out there and you shook your fists and you cried a little bit and you got angry a little bit and you patted yourself on the back. But what was achieved? What did you achieve for the people you claim to represent? Nothing. It is the Sunday after now, and everything is exactly the same as it was the Friday before. So congratulations. The whole thing is just like a weird propaganda piece to get you to believe that your neighbors are angrier than they actually are.
Yep. And somebody managed to do some sort of like a cell phone mapping thing. This was some time back, but it applies to all of these protests where they were comparing which cell phone signatures appeared at various rallies and determined that like 80% of them appeared at like, what was it, like 10?
They're all it's all Kamala's groupies. They're all super fans. They go on the road with the band and they appear at all the events. That's all.
Yeah,
she was that inspired.
It's not organic at all. It's a case of they're lying. We know they're lying. They know we know that they're lying, and etc. And yet they lie regardless. It's.
I mean, I have with these olds who are highly motivated, though. I have that personal experience where I went to that January 6th vigil 2 years ago now, and they told me to.
You shouldn't die.
Yeah, I mean these. These like 70-year-old retirees are taking a break from bingo night or whatever, and they're all on the Gallatin County Courthouse steps demanding justice for January 6th. And I go in and say, like, there's been a lot of injustice in the legal response to January 6th, and they're telling me to eat shit and die. So authentically motivated,
nothing better to do.
Olds in their hatred of Trump, I mean, they are a real thing too. So I suppose I should consider their existence a little more honestly. But anyway, are you ready for some hoax hate?
Let's do it.
All right.
And now the nobody saw it happen, but it's totally a product of Trump's America hoax hate crime of the week.
Ah, shit, it's backwards. You think they'll notice?
Well, lately I am on an incredible run of correctly predicting the most obvious hoax hate crimes ever predictable. So once again, congratulations to me. I'm so good at this. Last week, I correctly called the obviously fake, not fake news, fake noose. The obviously fake noose at that Allentown, Pennsylvania city workers desk. And then this week, it's that fight at the Charlotte high school that was supposedly an Islamophobic attack. Were you on the stream when we talked about this last time? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, it was supposedly an Islamophobic attack at a high school in Charlotte. It actually was just an idiot girl picking a fight with a guy and losing the fight.
Yes.
Fuck around and find out.
I remember this now. I was there for that.
I thought I remember you correctly. Before I had told you, you identified that this stupid girl probably picked a fight with a guy and lost.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Well, recall back in mid-March, if you missed that stream, Batman and I discussed this story from Ardrey Kell High School in Charlotte, North Carolina, where a Muslim girl was beaten by a male football player. And supposedly the guy had racial or anti-Islamic motives, and he said racial or anti-Islamic slurs when he did this. You remember this weird white Muslim guy who was a part of that story? He's like the family spokesman and a local activist. But the family and these Islamic activists demanded hate crime charges, and they're trying to shame the school. And but the story made no sense because you go down the story a little bit. They demand it like the news story from last week. They demand FBI investigation, and then the story quickly becomes, no, not like that. Stop investigating that way. It's kind of happened in this case too, or at least they don't like the results. But the story was odd even before the FBI involvement. The story was odd as told because the school, which isn't talking about these kids, the two people involved in this fight at the school, they're not naming them because they're juveniles. And the school's not saying much about what happened because it's an investigation into the behavior of juveniles. But the school suspended both of them. Now, why, if this was clearly a hate crime in which one student said, "Hey, I hate you, sand ends," and then punched her face in, why would the school be suspending the victim in that scenario? It made no sense. And you scroll down many paragraphs deep. Some rumors suggest she may have hit the boy first. Oh, rumors suggest that. Oh, the school's just going by rumors, I'm sure. And you had the weird white Muslim activist guy saying, "I can't confirm or deny that, but I can say this. If a girl punches me," well, first of all, why can't you deny that? Your whole point was we need hate crime. You can't deny that? That is kind of confirmation. But if a girl punches me, I'm not going to beat her halfway to death. So we're pushing for, yes, right. So girl punches you in the face and you're going to say, now, ma'am. That was very inappropriate. And I would appreciate it if you don't do that again. And then she shoots you in the face and you're dead. Anyway, that was the backstory.
Pulls out a knife and stabs you in the heart.
Right, yeah. Pulls the old Carmelo. You know, it's funny. It's like, I bet that kid his whole life was saying, "No, I'm not that Carmelo Anthony." And now the basketball player is going to have to say, "No, I'm not that Carmelo Anthony." It's really rough for guys named Carmelo Anthony. It's a bad run. Although, how many of those do you think there are? You know, this is okay. I don't mean to be insensitive about this sort of thing. As I mentioned, this is a quick side story. I'm culturally sensitive when it comes to ethnic names. I allow one apostrophe in an ethnic name, okay? I am not so set in my ways that everyone has to be named John, Matthew, Peter, Paul, Luke, whatever, okay? You can have
one apostrophe is allowed, but it must be pronounced.
You can have a D-Quan if you want. I'll allow that, okay?
That's right.
D-Quans are fine. You just can't be D-Quan. D-Quandre is where I draw the line, all right? No DeQuandres. Okay. Where I'm going with this is I go into, my love of Town Pump. Can I actually say this? I feel like I'm doxing someone. Fuck it. I'm going to do it anyway. I go into Town Pump and I'm not trying to take shots at this person. She seemed very nice. She handled our business interaction with professionality. However, she was a young woman of color, and her name was Oprah. You can't be named Oprah. Oprah is, you can't be Cher, you can't be Oprah. Okay? Carmelo Anthony, you can't be named Carmelo Anthony, and you can't be named Oprah. It's not like being named Mike Johnson, like the Speaker of the House or something. Oprah? Your mom was sitting around watching daytime TV and named you Oprah? Anyway, I'm being a dick to a nice young lady in my community. What am I doing? Am I wrong? Can you?
Well, you know who her mother's role model was then.
I guess there are worse role models. Oprah's done well for herself, though she's had some questionable politics along the way for sure. I don't know. Am I wrong in this? I don't know. I guess there's no reason you can't be named Oprah. I don't know.
It's taken.
Yeah, it's like
taken. That one's taken.
There just aren't other Oprahs. And I actually, I don't mean this to like mock her. I actually think that's probably a weird scenario where you're like, I mean, I did this. All right, Oprah, if you're out there listening and you're like, this son of a bitch, I sold him a Coke Zero with politeness, and now he's treating me this way. That's right, you did. And I am betraying your service. It was excellent. I did the same thing. My son's named Hayden. Gave him the old Anakin Skywalker name. Forever, he's going to be Darth Vader.
That's right, you did do this.
So I'm not. Maybe I'm a total hypocrite.
Yeah.
That's what Oprah. That's why Oprah was necessary. Oprah was necessary to illustrate to me my own mistake. That for as much as this sort of thing bothers me, I'm just as guilty as Oprah's mom. What the hell have I done?
Ultimately, a name is the function of a name is to distinguish you from other people, right? And remembering somebody's name is important, right? So that they can be addressed properly.
Yeah.
Who is going to forget her name?
That's true. Bro,
So
Oprah?
in a way, it may have been incredibly intelligent.
Anyway, thank you for indulging me in that pointless side story.
Great story. compelling, and rich.
But let's get back to it. So I reintroduced the story of the beatdown at the Charlotte High School that was supposedly Islamophobic. Well, they demand an FBI investigation. You now have FBI confirmation after the FBI looked into it. The FBI did get involved exactly the way the activists demanded. Now the FBI says there is no evidence of a hate crime.
Charlotte-Mecklenburg police, along with the FBI, say there is no evidence to support any hate crime charges in connection to a recent fight at a local high school.
The fight happened in early March at Audrey Kelly High School. Officials say a fight broke out in a classroom, leading to a female student needing facial surgery due to her injuries. Several days later, the family of the injured girl called for a hate crime investigation. They claim the other student involved called her racial slurs.
Now, CMPD released a statement saying officers, along with an FBI task force, reviewed the case and hate crime allegations. There is currently no active investigation by the FBI into this matter, as there is no evidence to support that the crime occurred due to the victim's religion, race, or ethnicity.
So, yeah, it was just an idiot girl who picked a fight with a guy and lost. Exactly as you called weeks ago.
Absolutely. I hope somebody picks up that phone because I did call it.
You can pat yourself on the back just like me. We're the champions of easily identifiable hoax hate crimes. Although
that's right.
Your call was a little more detailed than just hoax in general. I mean, there's a little bit of specificity to unpack there. Anyway, family not satisfied. Again, FBI, you have to get involved. No, don't get involved like that. That wasn't good enough. They're still demanding hate crime charges, federal hate crime charges at that. And so the statement from the family, which again is this weird like white Muslim dude speaking on their behalf at this press conference in front of the federal courthouse or wherever they are.
Oh my God, he looks like James Spader in that photo.
What is he wearing? Like a UPS uniform? I don't
know, but it's something that I would imagine that Raymond Reddington would wear.
I don't even know who that is.
It's the character, James Spader's character from The Blacklist.
Oh, is that a movie or a show? I'm lost.
It's a TV show.
Oh, well, I don't watch those either, unless they're terrible reality TV dating shows. So then I know everything about them. Or Yellowstone universe shows. I know everything about those too. But anyway, so the family spokesman comes out and says, what we have is not the evidence of no hate crime. Okay.
Naturally.
What we have is not the evidence of no hate crime. I'm not saying it wasn't a hate crime, though. What we have is evidence of the lack of a thorough investigation by Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department and the FBI. That's what he means.
It was a tactical double negative.
That is one of the most poorly constructed sentences I've ever seen. And, well, if you're saying we don't have evidence of no hate crime, do you have evidence of a hate crime is a better way to phrase that. And since you've been out publicly insisting that this is a hate crime, maybe you should provide that evidence to your local police department or the FBI. But until you do that, we're going to assume that it's not a hate crime because there is no evidence, because you've provided none, because it wasn't a hate crime. But it's also revealed in some of this follow-up reporting that the football player, the male football player who beat her ass, he's a student of color. I interpret that to mean he's black, but they say family of color. Okay. It sounds kind of hate crimey to keep smearing him when the evidence shows that the girl attacked him. That seems kind of hate crimey from the people who are pointing the finger that everybody else is committing hate crimes against them. But the unnamed boy's family gave a statement in this reporting. While we don't condone physical violence, we also don't condone our son being physically assaulted by anyone. However, what was ultimately a classroom fight between two students is now being positioned publicly as an opportunity by the female student's family using our son as leverage. At the news. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
Seems like an accurate assessment.
Yeah. There was this news conference on Friday. The girl's family pushed back on those statements, and they're accusing the boy's family of trying to make themselves appear the victims, but they are. The girl's injuries, they argue, show the incident went beyond de-escalation. Okay, but now you're reframing it. Instead of saying it was a hate crime in which he punched her face in because he hates Muslims, Now you're saying that he did not fulfill his responsibility or obligation to de-escalate. But if you're operating within that framework, that grants the premise that the girl attacked first. She attacked him, and it was his responsibility to de-escalate from there. Now you've totally changed your story. And by the way, it's not his job to de-escalate. It's his job to neutralize the threat presented to him. And it sounds like he did a fantastic job of that. But at the bottom of this report, it mentions that both of these students are charged in juvenile court with assault. So I guess maybe elements of both sides are true. Like, she initiated and he definitely beat her ass a little more thoroughly than was necessary to eliminate the threat. Is what sounds like happened.
Yeah, actually, that begs the question, though, because based on the injuries that she appeared to have, do we know if she was struck multiple times in the face?
I would assume.
Was he like wailing on her?
If it was one punch, that was a hell of a punch. I don't have the photos of the injuries handy. They're holding some up here. It's hard to see. It's kind of small. But it looks like she got her ass kicked for sure.
Right, but I mean, if you punch somebody right in the orbit of their eye, and you said this guy was a football player, he probably has. He's probably pretty stacked.
I would assume.
Right?
Yeah.
It could theoretically, this is conjecture, of course, but it could theoretically be that he just popped her a real good one, and that's all it took to make her require facial surgery.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. Like, hey man, if like a really big and strong high school football player one punches you in the face just right, like that could be enough to do damage requiring surgery for sure. But I'm
especially
sure
because it appears that he got the orbit of her right eye.
Yeah. Yeah, you could be on. You've been the decoder of this story the whole time. We'll check back in a few weeks, and you'll be exactly right. But in Pasadena, California, a vegan bakery owner says customers spotted racist graffiti outside her store. Apparently, a swastika and some kind of anti-Mexican or anti-Hispanic message, even though she is Filipino.
My mission is just to make people happy.
Which makes it even more confusing and troubling that Sunday morning, just outside her shop, someone scribbled hate speech onto the sidewalk.
A customer said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm calling the police." Why? And she said, "Did you see the writing in front of your shop?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And she showed me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is disgusting.
It was a swastika and a hateful message about Mexico. Yvonne is Filipino, so doesn't know if she was mistakenly targeted or this was a random act. But either way, it's not an easy thing to go through.
Our space has always been a place of community, kindness, and inclusivity. So we were really disturbed.
After posting what happened to social media, her customers showed up in support.
A lot of people are supporting us, and today we're really busy this morning and the earlier afternoon.
Well, Yvonne does have a camera outside her shop. It just doesn't have a view of the sidewalk, so they can't tell exactly when it happened or who did it.
No. I can't believe they have a camera that is not aimed at their front door of their business, the only place you would ever aim the most relevant place to aim a camera. They didn't have one.
And the perpetrator appeared to know exactly where to stand so that the camera didn't catch them.
What are the odds? Now, I searched for an image of this this swastika to see if it was correctly drawn or not. I don't think there is one out there. I want to see what this anti-Mexican, anti-Hispanic message was as well. Couldn't find the images. Even if you go to Yvonne's Vegan Kitchen Facebook page, it's just images of the cleanup. It's not the actual graffiti, air quotes. This looks like sidewalk chalk based on the image we can see in the reporting. Is there still in here? Like maybe not, but yeah, it looks like sidewalk chalk. And what I saw looked like it said "you're stupid," like you are the letters "you are stupid." But yeah. What luck, what serendipity that a little bit of minimally invasive sidewalk chalk prompted much more business for her. How wonderful that is. And yeah.
Just once, I want one of these stories to be like, we spoke with the owner of this shop, and this is what he had to say. I don't give a shit. What are you here for?
Well, of course, the way it always happens is the business owner calls the news station to break the news.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so it's a publicity stunt. Sorry, I'm at the point in the night where I'm getting tired and I can't talk anymore. And also I'm diseased or something like that. I don't know what's going on. But the reign of the courteous Nazis continues. You know, it's so nice of these rabid Nazis to use sidewalk chalk to do no damage at all in an easily washable way to convey their message in a way that, contrary to their purposes, actually increases traffic and business for the people they're trying to target. These Nazis are very courteous, as always.
Yeah, and there was a glass door they could break right there, and they didn't even bother.
Well, I guess they assumed that this woman in business had already broken all the glass ceilings or the glass panels. There's no point to. Why would you disrespect her in that way? I don't know, but okay. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Colorado before we're finished up for tonight. You might think gender transitions for children are child abuse. No, in Colorado, it's the opposite. Soon denying your kid's transgenderism will be abuse or abuse adjacent if a new bill gets signed into law. And I want to emphasize that. Your kid, okay? You have reservations about calling your kid a certain name or using pronouns. The state is going to potentially go after you or your custody of your child because you won't say it the right way, as though that's something adjacent to child abuse. This is all part of a broader bill that would classify dead naming people, as in using their original name and not their transgender name, as a form of harassment and discrimination. Under this bill, schools would be banned from gender-specific dress codes. You can't have different dress codes for boys and girls. And misgendering your own kid would be considered, quote-unquote, coercive control, meaning that the courts would be required to consider that conduct when deciding child custody cases. So to be perfectly accurate, the bill does not call misgendering your own kid child abuse. That is the language of critics of the bill who say that is essentially what it says. You have State Representative Jarvis Caldwell, a Republican, who says, the idea that misgendering your own child is considered coercive control, which is another word for abuse, child abuse, because you want to get your child help instead of affirming their delusions, and you can lose custody over your child over that. This is the most disgusting bill I've seen so far. Now, this bill has a long way to go, but if I understand correctly, it actually passed through committee in the Colorado State House on Friday. If it were to pass through the state house, it would go to the state senate. Maybe the governor would sign it. I don't know the political likelihood that this bill becomes law or not. Frankly, getting even this far is concerning. But the format for this would be something like if this took effect, the format of its effects would be something like this. Your loopy ex-wife wants to pump your kid full of estrogen. Say pump your son full of estrogen because she believes he's trans or whatever. You oppose that for perfectly understandable reasons. Instead of giving you a stake in that decision, the state, through the courts, they're going to say that you're hateful, that you're coercive, and they're going to block you from that decision. They might block you from your child's life altogether if they award full custody to your loopy ex-wife and she decides that you're some sort of threat or something like that. And this idea did pass through the California state legislature in 2023. It was too crazy for Gavin Newsom, who thought that it went too far, and he vetoed it.
Well,
now, before I get into this insane woman,
Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, before I get into this insane woman who supports this, you have any thoughts on just the concept of the bill?
I think this is going to, if this passes, if this becomes a law, something violent is going to happen, right? Because you are pushing.
Whoa there, Carmelo!
Up against the wall.
You got a knife in that backpack?
No, but seriously, this is like that Texas case, right? With Younger, I think his name was.
Yeah.
Where it was just shocking to me that guy didn't do something drastic, right? But if you make this a law and apply it to the entire state, something's going to go down. Something's going to happen, inevitably.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a whole lot of very hateful hate speech from you. And that's exactly the point of one of the Democrat members of the Colorado state legislature who's supporting this bill. Her name is Yara Zokai. Speaking of terrible names, that one doesn't even have any apostrophes in it, but I don't know. In responding to parents groups that oppose this bill for a lot of the reasons you're talking about, which is like, hey, they're my kids. And even if my wife and I disagree about how to raise our kids, the state is not going to intrude upon that and remove custody from one parent based on something like the words we use to address our child. And so this woman here, she was speaking in committee as this bill was being considered. She says all the opposition, or at least a significant portion of the opposition to this bill that she supports, they're hateful. They're on the Southern Poverty Law Center hate list. At least I think that's who she's talking about. And not only are they hateful, they're so out of touch that they're not even worthy of being heard. She said that opponents of her on this bill, they have the same role that the KKK would have when discussing civil rights, which is none. Listen to this insane woman.
We heard from groups that called trans community members groomers and pedophiles, that accuse our community members of heinous acts with children, simply because they exist, because of who they are. I will call those groups hateful. Some of the groups in opposition to this bill are on a list of hate groups maintained by one of the most well-known civil rights law firms. And yes, I will compare that to saying it's like asking someone working on civil rights legislation to consult with white supremacist groups. And I will do that unapologetically. But the reaction to this bill really proves the point as to the risks involved just in being an ally to the trans community. Messages like, "You sound like a groomer terrorist that need to be deported."
Bingo.
"Anyone who supports transgenderism in children deserves to be sent to the gallows."
Hell yes.
"Round them all up. These people are sick pedophile groomers."
Hell yes.
"I can't wait to see you tomorrow in person, you America-hating communist pig."
I agree with that.
Who sent those messages? They sound really cool.
Yeah.
Did that guy actually meet her in person? I guess not. It didn't. The meeting didn't happen, unfortunately. Left with a cliffhanger, though. Some points on the things that she said there. Any politician, regardless of perspective, if you're reading mean messages from your constituents, it means you've lost the plot. Remember, what's his face? The London mayor, Sadiq Khan, did this a few years ago at
That's right,
South by Southwest. Sadiq Khan is just a gay, muzzy terrorist. You're not getting the effect that you want, but you're actually... So, number one, it's hilarious, unintentionally. You're doing that. Number two, you're a politician. You deserve harsh scrutiny in every context, whether we're talking about like tax policy or in this one where you're talking about potentially taking people's kids away as well. If ever there's a time for people to be a little more forceful with their language, it would be this crazy lady thinking she can take your kids away from you based on what words you use to address them. Or at least she thinks that would be justified for a court to do that. That's getting mean messages is what being a politician is. A politician who only gets mean messages and not mean actions should be thankful. Be glad it's just emails. It's not tar and feather or something like that. But she says how dangerous this, or how this proves how dangerous it is to be a trans ally like she is. No, it proves the points of your opposition. Oh, all these people are so ridiculous to say that we're groomers and pedophiles. You cannot leave other people's kids alone. That's the whole point here. You can't leave their kids alone. You want to disprove their point? Leave other people's kids the hell alone. Stop inserting yourself between parent and child. Maybe you won't be called a weird pedo groomer anymore because you actually respect the relationship between parent and child. She has proven every accusation, if not pedophile outright, the accusation of inappropriately inserting yourself, no pun intended, between parent and child. She's proven that part of the accusation correct. You're the one creeping on kids, lady. That's their point. Stop creeping on other people's kids. You won't get these inflammatory accusations. And lastly, on the legislative process here, like this is Schoolhouse Rock stuff. How does a bill get passed? Yes, you do have to consult with all of your constituent groups. Why? Because you represent them. You don't just get to smear them and say, well, they're very bad, so their opinion doesn't count. It's unworthy of consideration in the legislative process. Who works for whom here? You can call them white supremacists or the KKK, whatever. The point is you represent them. You work for them. They don't work for you. You can't eliminate their concerns by calling them names. When you do that and say that they are to be excluded from the process because you consider their opinions to be so awful, what is that? Of course, fundamentally anti-democratic from a person I'm sure in every other context is supposedly standing up for democratic values that are at risk from everyone else except her. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I think she's another NPC who's been told what to think, and so she thinks it. I mean, there's no consistency in their logic. It's just they've been given their script, and so they're reading from it. She says things like, oh, I do this unapologetically. Like, oh, like that's so brave to do when you're going to be lauded by every, by every, every queer from here to Timbuktu, right? Like that doesn't require any bravery.
Where is Timbuktu? I'm not sure I know geographically, but
I used to know. I don't think I could tell you now.
I'll have to look that up. The other thing, like now that this has passed, again, the California state legislature and the Colorado state legislature, well, at least committee, it might pass through the Colorado state legislature. This must be a question on the next Democrat debate stage. Do you support taking kids away from parents if they don't use, or if they do use a different gender name or different gender pronoun? Do you support the state intervening and removing a child from the custody of that parent based on the words or the names that the parent uses to address the child? They'll treat that as absurd. Oh, where's that happening? Colorado and California, at least nearly. And this is not an accusation that anybody brought against them in the way that she wants to blame people calling her a pedophile or a groomer or whatever. You guys are picking this fight. You are saying we want the state to intervene in these households. We want the state to intervene between these parents and their children. That's the fight that you picked. Make them defend it. I'm not just saying like Republican Party. I'm saying honest journalists out there. This is a remarkable expansion of state power. Hey, parents, you better use these words to address your child in the way that the state wants, or potentially a judge could revoke your custody. That is incredible. And anybody, regardless of political persuasion, who has any respect for the parent-child relationship should be asking questions about that.
And it's wildly unconstitutional, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. Now, I know, I'm sure, obviously, we have laws about, say, like verbal abuse in other contexts. Like, I know that verbal abuse can come into custody battles when, say, you are, I don't know, like you just berate your child constantly. You're angrily yelling at them all the time and making their life miserable that way. Like, words do come into custody battles, but I've never heard of it in this way. Like, you will call them the name that they want to be called. Yeah,
I guess I hadn't really thought of it in that way.
They're saying this is in its very nature. Like if I named you John when you were born, and you decided later that you're Jane, and I still call you John, the state of Colorado is going to say that, if not the exact same thing, that is something akin to every time my middle school son John comes home, I say, like, you suck, John. I hate you. You're terrible. You're a disappointment to your father. Blah, blah, blah. Like, those are the exact same things. If he wants to be called Jane and I call him John, it's the same as sort of verbally berating him, harassing him, demeaning him, that sort of stuff. Anyway.
Glad that I've never had to deal with any kind of custody thing.
Yeah, pick your women wisely and hug your kids tightly, because the state is coming to break up that hug if it's not under the correct names, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, that'll be interesting to watch. We'll see where that bill goes in the coming days and weeks. But catch up on Super Chat and get out of here for the evening. So I left Odyssey hanging at the break. I'm sorry about that. I know Blankets hangs out over there. Blankets, let me see what you got to say. Great memes as always. Appreciate those. Blanket says, Matt, when even the white person gets attacked some black people will still get upset at white people. Yeah, I mean, I guess it shows the extent of the commitment to that narrative. Like, this was, based on my understanding of the facts at this point, a straight up murder, and it's still finding ways to blame the kid who was murdered. Also says, Matt, notice when black people attack white people, the media like MSNBC and others don't talk about it. I mean, it depends where. I've seen a lot of discussion of this week, but to your point, have I seen like an in-depth MSNBC panel discussion about it? No. Maybe that exists. I don't know.
Well, what they do is they basically briefly mention that this event happened, and they sort of use carefully worded language to exclude the details that would make it as, fiery as it should be. And then they move on so that you can't necessarily say they didn't cover it. Right?
Yeah. They just do the box checking. I'm sure there probably was some box checking on this, but yeah, I mean, the thing is, when it is discussed, it's that's an isolated local crime story. Okay. But then, like I said, if it's reversed and it was a white stabbing of a black kid, then somehow that's part of a trend, even though the reverse is actually true. Generally speaking, black murders of white people per capita or proportionally are much higher than white murders of black people. But, Jasmine Crockett style, the narrative has to be upheld that 80% of the violent crime in this country is committed by white supremacists who hate the bill in Colorado or whatever, but yeah, so it is interesting, like when trends are discussable and when they're not. Like, what's an isolated story versus what is part of a trend? That's really where narratives are crafted. And clearly,
racial lines. If you can use it to target white people, that's when that's when you say it's a trend. Yep.
Pretty much, yeah. Sorry, I just saw another chat come in here that made me laugh. We have a commentary on Oprah that I'll get to in a minute. Over on Rumble, thank you, Blankets. Entropy Nomad, victim mentality avoids accountability. Yeah, victim mentality is a terrible thing to have, and even for the dad, like in this case where, obviously I don't like what he's saying about trying to control the opinions that people can have about it. I like the commentary about putting faith in God. And even when you are a victim, and he clearly is in one of the most horrific ways possible, a habit in your life of rejecting victim mentality always is still of benefit to you. Like the classic saying, life is more about how you react than it is about what happens to you. All right. I don't know if that extends all the way into like my son got murdered, which is about as bad as it gets. But even when you are genuinely victimized, as this family has been in this situation, assuming that you are not a victim and rejecting that victim mentality will prompt you to do everything you can to exert your control over the situation, to come out of it in the best.
Other son.
Right. Yeah. There's that too. Like, you still got one, man. So, I can respect that about him too, even though I don't like some of the commentary. Rejecting the victim mentality is a steel-manned way to look at it. And so I do appreciate that. Dangerous Spaces says U.S. citizens need to have guaranteed speech because they are somewhat stuck living in the country. Foreign nationals should not be afforded the same right because they have somewhere else to go. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting about the theory of the First Amendment, like was referenced in that segment. Now, obviously, I think the reason we have free speech in the First Amendment is because the most reliable way we have to arrive at the truth is through the free and open competition of ideas. Nobody has a monopoly on the truth. The only way we arrive at it is by making sure that as much of that speech competes as possible. That's why we protect free speech in principle. However, there is one counter principle in our system of government, and that is that the government and the policy of the United States is to reflect the opinions of and the will of the American people. And so we vote, in theory, I know it's not always in practice these days, but in theory, we vote to put people in power who will enact our will and enact the policy that we prefer. When you have foreign nationals coming in and making a ruckus, engaging in this sort of tomfoolery And I think distorting that debate and distorting the policy crafting that happens as a result of a different reflection from the opinions of the American people, I think that is compromised too. Like a bunch of foreign nationals coming in here and doing a bunch of protest events compromises what is supposed to be our government reflecting our will. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say that it's comparable to an invasion.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in a mostly peaceful way. You know, they're not coming in and pillaging and raping your women. They're just kind of, it's a slower.
Well, if somebody comes into your house, right, and just say, you know, they break in and then they sit on your couch, there's still a threat. Right?
Yeah,
You're not just gonna go, well, he's there now.
Yeah, I'll take your, like they found the key that was under your doormat. They didn't break to enter, but they did enter, and they're just sort of politely sitting on your couch, and maybe they even made you a sandwich.
They're making use of they're making use of your resources.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Dangerous Spaces. Palatine, this is what I was talking about. If she can't be Oprah, does that mean I can't name my son Adolf? Yeah, I don't know. I clearly I have to think about the rules here. I saw the name tag. Oprah? What the come on. Anyway.
Well, the guy who invented the saxophone was named Adolf Sax.
Would that had to be before Hitler's time though, wasn't it? The instrument.
Yeah,
it must predate Hitler.
It's
Dangerous
just a
Spaces.
fun name to say.
Adolf Sax. Dangerous Spaces also says when people talk about equal treatment, they question why men would want to hit women back. They miss the point. The point is that equal treatment is not just the benefits, it's also the negatives. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I get it. I would not be honest if I told you that if a man came at me with in a physically threatening way, or even attacked me, like punched me or whatever, I would perceive the threat differently than if a woman did it. And I'm sure I would react differently. But this is a question of justice, not necessarily how you would react on instinct. And I don't think that anybody has an obligation to, like, if someone is coming at you and attacking you with physical force, do you have a moral obligation to evaluate the degree of that threat and then calculate a proportional response in that moment? I think you have a moral justification in neutralizing the threat that has been presented to you. And if it happens to be that the force is a little disproportionate, well, that's the fault of the person who picked the fight.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree.
Don't pick a fight if you're a woman. And this is why we need to go back to the old way of just women can't be out without a man, you know? Sorry. You can't walk around that way. You can't be trusted not to punch a man in the face and then have him break your skull bone. We got to
start using the rule of thumb the way it was supposed to be used.
What was that about beating your wife? That's how thick the switch could be or something
the
like
switch,
that?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Dangerous Spaces also says, man, bloody lefties suck at analogies. The only way her logic makes sense is if the KKK was saying, we need to stop black people being harmed, especially irreversibly. Shut up, silly woman. I don't have that one handy. Somewhere in here. I should have for her, though. Oh, here we go. I got some.
Shut up, bitch! Oh, my God! Shut up!
We got plenty.
Silly woman.
All right. Good on Rumble. I should have asked you, by the way. I know it's late over there, so don't. I just got a couple more, but don't feel like you have to stick around if it's too late.
We're good.
Let me see. Yeah, just a few more here. Right. Esoterica Unbound said, their basic defense always comes down to it's a black thing. You can't understand. When we're the ones called racists, then we're called racists for not understanding. Well, I don't know if I've heard. I'm not saying you didn't hear that, Esoteric Unbound. Has anybody defended Carmelo Anthony saying it's a black thing, though? Listen, man, you wouldn't understand stabbing people in the heart. It's a black thing.
Yeah. I mean, if they really are using that argument, I've never seen it used myself, but if they really are using that argument, isn't that like incredibly counterproductive? They're like, you know, black people are just as normal as you or I or anybody else, and they deserve their place in a diverse society and all that stuff. But you know, it's a black thing. They stab each other. That's
I thought
you wouldn't
that
understand.
I thought that was the
yeah.
KKK argument, was that stabbing people in the heart is a black thing. Now I guess
yeah, exactly.
Now everyone's in agreement. Esoteric Unbound also says Trump shouldn't be defunding universities because they won't get with his program. He should be defunding them because they are parasites killing Western civilization. Enough of the First Amendment virtue signaling. Yeah, we didn't get into that as much. But yeah, okay. If we're going to publicly fund universities, you're correct. I think the answer is we shouldn't, like you're saying. If we do, of course, I wouldn't want the money awarded based on like, you must hold this perspective or not. And I would be a little wary of that. And it does seem like there's some of that going on. But even if I take that at its worst, that there's like some perspective policing in Department of Education money or whoever's handling this, I still don't think not awarding public money is the free speech threat on the scale of, say, the worst of the Biden administration, which was like working with social media companies to get around the First Amendment to take down the average citizen's speech in an online platform, that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that like because Biden was bad, everything Trump has done is excused. I don't know. There's a lot of slippery slope argument to this case from Matt Taibbi, and frankly, slippery slopes are often correct. So I'm not saying that that's invalid. It's not inherently a fallacy or anything like that. It's just
just ask Rick Santorum.
He was correct about everything. Yeah,
he was
the king of the slippery slope. He's king of the slippery hill. He stands atop it and has never slipped. But I don't buy the alarmism that like, oh, you know, if Mahmoud Khalil gets deported, then like I have to worry about feds kicking down my door for what I said on my stream or something like that. I know that's an extreme version. That's an exaggerated presentation of their case. I don't know. I care about the First Amendment a lot. I've built a lot of what I have on defending the First Amendment, and I will continue. I don't know that a lot of this immigration and university stuff is quite the free speech threat that it's being presented as. That's kind of my opinion on it. But
well, I mean, I agree with the premise of the person who did the super chat in the first place. It's, you know, this doesn't have to be a free speech issue, right? It's not us. It's not you said a thing, therefore we are taking your money away. It's you are doing awful shit, so we're taking your money away.
There are many reasons they should be defunded. Yeah, we hopefully we can all agree on that. Jay Brits, Galt's Landing sounds like a play on John Galt from Atlas Shrugged. Okay, so I mean that's a book, and I don't read books either. I don't watch movies. I don't read books. But I guess I do know. No, I didn't know the character's name though. So. Are you well read?
Ayn Rand is difficult to read.
Okay.
Her style is very, very dry, and her characters act more like plot necessary robots than like people. But and Atlas Shrugged is, I think my copy of it's like this thick. It's really, really long. So I've never finished it actually.
All right. Thank you, Jay Brits. Duvier Verdel? I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation, but the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. They just use the Boondocks logic to keep up the hoax hate. You know, people say that in the context of God all the time too. And frankly, I find it a lot more interesting in that context, but it is interesting that the hoax hate is something of a God-like figure to these people. It has to exist. Its existence is the only way that our understanding of this world makes any sense.
Well, it's the demand for hate is just, it far outstrips the supply. So
they're going to
how we wind up with this crap.
They're going to keep trying. Unfortunately, the supply of her face was perfectly sufficient for demand from his fist. So didn't work out so well. Her economics analysis there. Purpose of the ages. What are we to say about the parents who allow their children to be manipulated into being transmissions? My assumption is they made a lot of bad decisions and neglect before the state showed up. Also adds, but by the way, I agree the state should not have the right to insert themselves. But is it based based that the state is claiming the parent is not suitable to care for a child if the child is a transmission? So my understanding of this law is if there is a custody dispute, okay, it's not as though like I'm in my wife and I have a son or a daughter who believes himself or herself to be transgender, and we're deciding how to navigate that, but we agree. The state's not going to intervene there. Where the state could intervene is if there is a custody dispute. Now, maybe that's from an existing divorce and really has nothing to do with the transgenderism, or maybe it's because of the transgenderism. But in a custody dispute, this bill would require the judge to consider the affirmation of the gender identity from each parent. And let's say it's a custody dispute, in which case mom is all about transitioning this child and dad is like, that's freaking crazy, stop what you're doing. It will be grounds for the judge potentially to say custody is hereby awarded to mom because dad is an abuser based on his refusal to affirm the child's identity. That's what we're setting up. So those are the circumstances in which the state would insert or assert its will, is where there's a custody dispute between mom and dad. But I guess the way you solve that is don't have custody disputes. Stay married and take care of your kids. Now, easier said than done in a lot of circumstances here. I understand, especially with legal structures, the way women can screw men over on completely insane, irrational grounds like child gender transitions. There are a countless number of men out there who would share the opinion that divorce should be essentially a never option. But the fact of the matter is, their wife doesn't share that view, and their wife goes to the courthouse and gets all the paperwork done, and it's single party, it's no fault, it's whatever, and that guy consented to none of it, and his life has been upended by a wife who decides that she wants a divorce for dubious reasons and wants to trans the kid for dubious reasons. So I really, whenever I talk about divorce stuff, I don't mean that to condemn guys out there who have been put into this situation. I understand that a lot of times it's out of your control, and I sympathize with that. So, anything else you want to say on the Colorado bill?
All I can tell you is that if that bill does get passed, then I think the state in general is just kind of screwed. They
have been screwed for a long time. I always say about Montana, or what Colorado is just Montana with Hillary voters. That's what I used to say back in, when Hillary was a viable candidate. But now it's not even that different. They just busted up some more illegals in town here with like a whole bunch of meth and fentanyl and yeah,
really?
It's everywhere. So I love to think that we don't have the problems that Colorado has. Give it like 10 years and we probably will.
Yeah.
But I'll make the best of that decade. Anyway, all right. Anything else you want to say before we're out of here? Oh, I do have one more. Sorry, Laughing Boy. It's not what the colleges are doing. It's what they're not doing. They are not protecting the students that are involved, the ones that got attacked for going to classes by the ones deported. See, that's the thing about the Mahmoud Khalil case. Now, if you can show me that he attacked somebody this was at Columbia, wasn't it? I forget which school. Yep. But if you can show me that he attacked a person during one of these protests, or even obstructed someone, there he is blocking someone from accessing their dorm, accessing class, accessing whatever. I get it. Okay, you are committing criminal activity. At this point, it's beyond perspective. Absolutely get the hell out of here. I just haven't seen that. What I find frustrating about the Mahmoud Khalil case, and this is not to frankly, I personally don't care if he goes. I'm not going to shed a tear for Mahmoud Khalil leaving the country. I'm just saying that I find it frustrating that when you ask, okay, what did he do? And I'm not even asking that rhetorically to suggest he didn't do anything wrong. I'm asking, I need clarification. I don't see the specific action that he took. You get almost shouted down, oh, well, look it up. Blah, blah, blah. I'm asking genuinely, where did he obstruct people? What was the view that he expressed that got him in this deportation hot water? And I just don't see the specifics. Now, maybe I'm just stupid and it's all out there and I haven't found it, but I just haven't seen that information.
I think while I can sympathize with your desire for more information to sort of make the picture more complete, I think ultimately it doesn't really matter because he's an immigrant, right? He was here. He's a guest. He's a guest in our country. And if you go into somebody's house as a guest and you shit on their floor, you're going to get kicked out.
Get the hell out
That's
of
what
here.
he did. Exactly. Yes. So, and it's not really a free speech issue either, because, I mean, I don't know whether or not he did, I don't know whether or not he did obstruct somebody or touch anybody or assault anybody. I don't know. But he is not a U.S. citizen, and therefore the rights that are that apply to U.S. citizens don't necessarily apply.
I want to learn more about the basis for why non-citizens who are here legally. It's even disputed what his status was. Was it a student visa? Did he have a green card? Was he a permanent resident? That's still unclear. I haven't seen definitive information on that. But I need to learn more about the legal basis for, say, why do foreign people who are here legally but are not citizens, why do they have the same, say, speech rights that American citizens enjoy? I don't know the history of how that has been determined. I know that they do. I know that, like, if you're here on you have a green card and you go out and like protest and say the government sucks, you can't be arrested for that. In theory, you can't really be deported for that. But why? Like, what's the legal history on establishing that rule?
Yeah, I don't know.
I have to learn more about that. I saw one more come from Purpose of the Ages. We'll take that and we'll call it a night. That wasn't my question. Oh, well, I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying, though. My question is, would it be based? So I thought you were saying based on what? You're saying, would it be based? Would it be based if the state took the trans kid from the parents because the parent neglected the kid, which made them trans? I'm not even sure I follow now. Okay, state
basically he's saying that because the parent is so bad that their kid wound up being a transmission, as he put it.
Yeah.
Is it based that the state is taking the kid away from parents that are so terrible that they permitted this to happen in the first place? And I think my response to that would be not necessarily, because a lot of schools are doing this behind parents' backs.
The gender transition stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. This is too advanced for my stupid brain this late in the night. If the state took the okay, so there's a kid who's trans. The state takes the kid from the parents because the parent neglected the kid.
Neglected the kid to the point where they were able to get into the trans stuff in the first place.
Being trans is a product of some sort of child neglect or child abuse in the first place.
Right.
And so it's accidentally or unintentionally. But that's the problem, is you can't really be like neglecting the kid and calling the kid the wrong name at the same time. Like either you're present or you're not, you know?
I mean, I think you can sort of interact with a child and still be guilty of neglect.
Yeah.
If you're not taking care of that child's needs.
All right. Fair enough. I'm going to call it, wait. There's one more on Rumble. Laughing Boy adds, it's what the colleges are doing or not, and that's why Trump is removing funding. He's getting deported for starting riots and general trespassing. But that's the thing, though. Like, what was the riot that he started? And where? I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just don't see the evidence of him, like, inciting a riot. Or, I mean, the worst I've seen is these people, like, occupied buildings and stuff. I guess if he's party to that, okay. General trespassing, obviously he has a right to be at the school if he's a student there. Trespassing in like buildings he didn't have a right to be in or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm again, none of this is to say he didn't do that or everything's fine or I love Mahmoud Khalil or any of that. I just want to know, like, this is the thing that he did that is grounds for deportation. Like, here's the video of him doing it. Here is, him talking about doing it. Here's a photo of him doing it. I just need to see a little bit more of that. That's all. And it totally, whatever happened at Columbia was a lot of jackassian behavior. So I wouldn't be surprised to learn that he participated in that. But anyway, appreciate your support for the show. Let's see. I think we're all set. Anything else you want to say before we're out of here?
No.
Okay. Well, thanks for sticking around for the long haul tonight, man. That was a long show. I keep saying I'm going to find a way to trim these down, and I never do. So we're all set.
You're fated to have 3-hour streams
forever. That's all right, though. Appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Thank you to our live chatters and super chatters for making the live show a success. If you're listening on demand later, thank you kindly as well for supporting the show. Of course, thanks to my guest tonight, Alison Morrow. Find her links in the description. Thanks to Batman for sitting in this evening. And of course, thanks to producer Tim for his assistance as well. If you'd like to find more to listen to, check out the podcast page of my website, mattchristiansenmedia.com/podcasts. You'll find not just the video show, but the audio show too, if you prefer audio podcast listening. Anything else show related? You want to send a message for the Wednesday stream, you want to pick up some merch, you want to check out my Bible study. mattchristiansenmedia.com is where you find all of that, or mattis.gay if you prefer brevity. I'm back on Wednesday and Sunday nights, of course. Have a great night and a great week.